What is up, fellow sickos? I am Dan Favale coming at you with, as always, my certified fantabulous co-host, Mr. Grant Hughes. It is time, now that every team has played more than 10, 12 games of the NBA season, for a good old mega round of NBA fact or fiction. But before we get to that, Mr. Hughes, how the heck are you?
I'm doing well, and that's a fact. So check one of those off the
Fiction.
list.
I call bullshit.
Fiction. I'm doing terrible, Dan. I got to talk about my feelings. How are you doing?
I am fantastic. I'm a little
Great.
tired, but no one cares about that. There's been some, I guess, NBA media members who have been on the East Coast recently and have been talking about like how hard it is to cover. They don't know how people do it. And I was like, yeah, you're damn fucking right. Like, it's about time that we East Coasters receive some acknowledgement for really making this work. You're welcome, Grant.
That was the listeners probably couldn't audibly hear me rolling my eyes, but no, we West Coasters, we've got it so much better, just time wise. It's like our late games are done at 10 o'clock a lot of the time.
I will say the earlier ones, though, that's why I'd probably prefer Mountain Time, because then it's okay. The first game starts at 5 rather than 4 is pushing it, especially if you have a real job. Like 4 is kind of pushing it.
Yeah, that's true. But then you're done. Nothing. Here's the hack. Here's the best thing. When a game you really want to watch is that early game, and you start you know at the 4 o'clock for me, and you don't have to start it until say 7 or whatever, because you're on League Pass and you can and then you just breeze through that thing. If you could skip free throws and bang out a game in like 52 minutes, like easy, or even less if you're real handy with the skip button.
If this is what you do for a living, like you, the West Coast is definitely where it's like
it's way more efficient. Yeah.
So I wanted to just ask you about, or it's not even ask you, because we both know how we approach this. These are not statements that we would necessarily believe, because we will call some of them fiction. So it's not, we came into this and it's, as an example, I really think that the Dallas Mavericks should trade Luka Doncic. That's not one of them, but fact or fiction. If we propose that, it's something we've either seen or a sentiment that's been floating around, or these are teams that were that people are generally concerned about. So that's how we framed this. Would that be an accurate way to put it, Grant? That we're not.
Yeah, it's somewhere between like a people are saying like prompt and also like a this at least pull the veil all the way back. These are all just ways to like let's have a discussion about a topic that like Brooks, like we should have a discussion about, like, because it's not going to be, none of these should be easily dismissed or accepted out of hand. I don't think that's kind of the zone we're going for.
Challenge accepted. I feel like we might have had one in there where people are like, why is this on here?
I was just thinking of some that I proposed. I was like, that's like a 25-second conversation.
It's also, if you want to really super peek behind the curtain, it's a way to cast a wide net without us having to. I enjoy those episodes and I hope people enjoy them too, but without us regurgitating every NBA team's something, like every NBA team's 5th best player. Let's do that podcast. You guys want to hear that one? Ranking every NBA team's 5th best player.
Ranked.
We begin with a little Tyler Herro and Norman Powell. Grant, you have no idea of the order because I did not give you an input before I made the screen assets. What the hell do we call the pictures? Whatever, the vid. So you're not going to know. You know what's coming right now, but you don't know what's coming next. That's very exciting, even though you know about all the topics we're going to discuss. So maybe it's less exciting. NBA fact or fiction. At least one of Tyler Herro and Norman Powell is going to make a 2025 All-Star team, Mr. Hughes.
I mean, can we just talk about were we having a shooting guard renaissance? Because both of these guys I think of as like pure twos, which feels like a dying breed of NBA player, or it did over the last 5 years or so.
Bringing it back to.
Right. Yeah. Hey, Bradley Beal having a great season. Twos are back, baby. The 2024-25, the season of the two. Okay, this is on its face. This is kind of wild. Neither's been an all-star before. Norman Powell's been a career 6-man. Herro, I think if you'd polled people at random points over the last 3-4 years, you probably would have said Herro is also kind of a 6-man type, just because of the heavy offensive skewing game of his. Both these, and this is just, these guys are both, if they make all-star teams, if one of them does, it'll be because of the offense. They're both averaging just under 24 a game. Both of them are making damn near half their threes. I think Powell's actually like in the 49%, and Herro's way down there at like 47 something. So the ball's going in. We've talked about, or I think have talked about the total shift in Herro's shot diet. Just long twos are out.
He's taken outside the paint all year.
He just doesn't shoot them. Yeah, doesn't shoot them. So
he went from like they were over a quarter of his shot diet to now they're like 4%.
Right. And I mean, like, That's one of those things where when we'll get to actually assessing this at some point, just changing the shot diet's one of those ways where, if you go if it's preseason and you're like, what's this guy need to do to improve? And it'll be like, oh, tighten up his handle or like become a better 3-point shooter. Herro's proving, I mean, the ball's going in a ton, but it's like, just don't shoot low expected value shots. And even if you're less efficient on the high expected value ones, it's gonna come out in your favor. So yeah, like they both have been just phenomenal scorers. Powell especially has just walking into threes now, just off the dribble threes. He's always been like a dangerous driver. So the question then is, I don't know if you want to split it by conference or it's like who's more likely. Just based on the numbers now, they're both in the top, I think, 15 in scoring. Super efficient.
I'll give you one better. If you look at, so they're both averaging about 25 points a game. 24.9 is what they're both at. So if you look at what their true shooting percentages have been, what they're both north of 65 right now. So here's every player in the NBA averaging as many points as Tyler Herro and Norman Powell on as good or better true shooting. So we have Tyler Herro and Norman Powell. We've established this. Karl-Anthony Towns, Nikola Jokic, Kyrie Irving, Kevin Durant, and Anthony Davis. I will take you one step further because I think this is going to answer what your question is too. The players who are then also doing this efficiency and averaging 5 assists per game, Tyler Herro and Nikola Jokic. That's it. That's the list.
I think I'm leaning fact. It's super early. They're not going to keep making in the high 40s from deep just because nobody does, unless you're Grayson Allen last year. I don't know who I'd pick as more likely. Are you with me that it's a fact? Because we're saying or, not both. One of these two guys is going to be an all-star.
Yeah, I'm going to go. The West is just going to be so difficult because I know Luka's kind of off to a slow whatever start, but
he's going to make it. No one's leaving him off the team.
That's my point. So then you have Steph in there. I guess will John Morant not really be out? Kyrie Irving was having a good year. Now he's injured. The Mavs has dealt with some weird injuries too all year. So it's maybe Norman Powell's chance of making it is higher than I'm assigning. So I'm going to go fact here, but it does feel like just by virtue of Tyler Herro being in the East that he has the better chance of making it overall.
I think I would agree. I guess maybe just like a sub question that's got nothing to do with fact or fiction. Like, which of these two guys do you think will finish the season with numbers closest to where they are now? Like who's like, I guess maybe this is like, which one is a little bit more or less of a mirage than the other?
I probably would go with Norman Powell because his role is higher volume and he's taken some different shots, but like this is someone who's always just been an incredibly efficient scorer for the most part, and like taking the right shots. And so Tyler Herro, it's look, one of the things he's done a better job of doing too is it's not even just where you're shooting from, it's how you're shooting them. He is really, I think he's still taking more pull-up jumpers as a part of his shot diet overall, but like the gap between those and the catch and shoots has shrunk substantially, and he is taking like more of his threes, I think, are catch and shoot threes than they are pull-up threes at this point. He's always been relative to league average, a really good pull-up 3-point shooter. So part of that is, does he revert at all, especially if the Heat wind up dealing with a Jimmy Butler or maybe a Bam Adebayo absence down the line, and they maybe need him to do a little bit more on the ball? So it's weird that I think Tyler Herro right now might have a better chance of making an all-star team, but Norm Powell feels more real, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I was kind of thinking about it because in the context of most improved, because a lot of people, well, not a lot of people, I've seen the case made that Powell is like the type of improvement that should get consideration for that award. And I was going back and forth between like, well, he is just playing like 8 more minutes per game than last year. And, all of his rate stats are way up, but it's like, how different is Norman Powell really? I mean, I think the size of his role is different. It's not just more minutes. It's like he's way more important to his team's offense than he's ever been. And so that means more attention. And coupled with like some of the gains in, off the dribble shooting and all this other stuff, like he's a really interesting most improved case. It would be wild for a guy that finished top 5 and 6th man of the year the last 2 years. He's going to get no votes for that because he's just going to start all year. To then go win most improved. Like that doesn't happen all that often. So I think I like Powell's like sustainability a little more than Herro's, but I think there's a good chance both these guys finish the year, around 60% true shooting and averaging over 20, which is like, that's an elite offensive player. That, you know, this 65% on 25 points, that like that's where Kevin Durant lives and basically nobody else. But they could both be, you know, just give them a flat A grade as offensive players. I would believe that's sustainable for both.
So if both of them hold, though, do you think Tyler Herro has the better case to win most improved player? Because watching the two, I feel more of a material change in the way that Tyler Herro is playing. But like, there's something to be said about, okay, Norman Powell's role is bigger, but more of his shots are self-created than basically ever, I think. And he's maintained this efficiency. So, and like, you know, he's changed out like a lot of his 3-point attempts. Like, okay, you've shifted from some of the corner and like now you're taking more above the break ones. That would be an interesting discussion that I don't know whether I'm prepared to have at the moment.
Yeah, no, I'm not sure I am either. I would just look at, if you're most improved is so like, who knows what most improved criteria really is. I think if you're looking at the two of them together, you're noticing Herro's averaged over 20 a game the last 3 years prior to this year and has shot it like very, very well, generally speaking, from threes. Like the 37.8% is his lowest 3-point hit rate of the last 3 seasons prior to this year. So I could see the argument being like, he's just, you know, he's gotten a little better. It's not the same thing as Powell, you know, jumping from the bench to the starting lineup and taking on this bigger role and being super efficient.
If very quickly, if the voting needed to be done today, are both of them all-stars?
If it's today, then yeah, because just partly because you have so many guys that are hurt that you would normally consider.
I wonder how many people are going to be prepared to have this discussion, not only with a straight face, but like, no, this is like legitimately, we need to consider this. It's like, you don't just, we're not like making a mock. We just spent 10 minutes on whether Tyler Herro or Norman Powell is going to be an all-star. I think that means it's time to move on, Grant. This is yours, even though you don't know it's coming.
All right. So we got Jared McCain, the guy we just talked about at the exact right time last time we recorded, or Steph Castle will win Rookie of the Year. Fact or fiction?
I mean, who would you pick to win Rookie of the Year right now based on what we've seen?
If it's just the numbers, I think probably it is McCain. And then you got to think about 2 Memphis guys in Edey and Jalen Wells. I mean, Edey was a pretty popular pick. Our guy Reed Shepherd, not a factor, unfortunately.
I said he was going to run away with it, Grant, even though I was warned many times he wasn't going to play.
You warned me when I said Shepherd was going to be he'll be undeniable. Like you're like, oh, there's a lot of guys on the Rockets that need to play. Shut up, Dan. He's super good. He's going to play. No, you were right. I mean, it's McCain now, isn't it? Like if you're picking today, it's him. The question is just like, are we going to see Reese Shea, Sarr, probably not Shepherd, you know, whoever else you want to list? Because we are like a dozen games into the year. So that makes it a little tough for me. But I don't have any doubt that if it's today, I think it's just McCain.
I think you're probably right. I included Steph Castle, though, because I've been very impressed by the defense, and I think he's shown some playmaking flashes. I have very little confidence in the shooting coming around. And so if your Rookie of the Year case is kind of built on you're playing, you're defending your ass off, and like the passing is progressing, he probably needs to make more strides as a scorer to be thrown in this. But I actually think I included him because I don't think people are talking, because there's a chance that he's just been a top 5 rookie. So I mean, the Jalen Wells of it all, Zachary Reese-Shea's been good. We have Keyshawn George. I feel like not enough people are maybe talking about Steph Castle's defense.
I think that's fair. This is an unfair question because it's been difficult from the moment he was a prospect, but like, do you have any better sense of like a good comp for Castle, or like what kind of player this guy is going to be? Because coming in, you know, I'll never get it out of my head. Somebody said like, he's kind of an Iguodala type, and I haven't seen that, but that's like, well, that's like catnip for me. I was like, please give me all the Iguodala types. Is he a point guard? The shooting makes it hard to use him for a major on-ball role because he'll just get ignored. Ditto for off-ball, but the defense is real. I'm still struggling to decide like what I think he is, other than just like a guy that guards his ass off and plays hard. And if he learns to shoot, then we're talking.
Yeah, and it's like he's had games, but I don't know how much this matters. We've had games where we've seen him take. I think he took. I want to say he takes 7 against the Jazz the other day, and he made 3 of them. So like he's getting them up. There's value in that. And he's at over 3 on the season and under 25 minutes per game. So I think there's value in taking it, but to be below 70% from the foul line, I look at him. I don't know if he's, what do you think about like pre-injury Sean Livingston? Is that
that's interesting.
Or would it be post-injury Sean Livingston is better? Like, who's the better athlete Because you would have to go with if it's pre-injury Sean Livingston, then maybe it's post-injury Sean Livingston's the better comp.
Maybe. I'd love to see if
Let's just name former Warriors we could compare him to.
Yeah, no, yeah. Is he really kind of more of a McCaw or Jacob Evans? That's interesting. On McCain. So we have to talk about the numbers. The last 3 games as we're recording this, 27 points, 23 points, 34 points, and 10 assists that most recent game against Cleveland. So like, we're not messing around. A lot of this is he's got opportunity. He's played over 30 minutes per game in his last 4. He got a start finally against the Cavs in that they lost, but that's just what happens when you don't play any of your guys because they're all hurt or load managed. Maybe the question is McCain, assuming the Sixers are ever healthy, is his role going to stay big enough, And I think he's played well enough so far to suggest that like you probably just need to play him over your Eric Gordons or whoever. That's because that's how he loses this, because he's been the best rookie or among the best rookies statistically so far. Big role, getting lots of shots up, been efficient, showing more on-ball stuff than maybe it was expected he'd have. Can he continue to play enough if and when the Sixers have bodies out there? I'm inclined to say, like, I just don't think you diminish this guy's role any more than you have to. He's shown enough so far that, like, why wouldn't you want this guy on the floor?
Right. And I think also what helps his case is maybe they're going to run into the existential dilemma of, do we think we can play him and Tyrese Maxey together? And then I guess you would just go with Embiid, George, and I would assume Caleb Martin, or is there someone else you've traded for at that point? But like, when you look at, I think what helps him is look at kind of the way some of the other guards have played so far. Like, okay, Kyle Lowry is shooting 38% or whatever from 3, but he has not necessarily looked great. Eric Gordon is certainly not looked great. Reggie Jackson isn't part of the regular rotation. So the fact that I guess the other guards haven't played well enough to usurp him, if you were just looking at the secondary rotation, maybe that bodes well for him. I think a lot of it might come down to, and I think he's put up more of a fight on defense than I was expecting, which is why. So the comp I gave for him, by the way, was it's like Desmond Bane and Dante DiVincenzo merged into one player, is what it kind of feels like.
That's like this. You get the size right, because McCain he's one of those in betweens. Like, oh man, that's good size if he were a pure point guard, but as a wing player, it's, I don't know, and that's kind of where DiVincenzo lives. Although DiVincenzo's a sneaky 6'5", I think he just doesn't play. Right. Doesn't seem like that. We haven't weighed in. Is fact or fiction? One of these two guys is going to win Rookie of the Year.
I'm going to say fact, as a way of, Jaron McCain's been great, but also of just kind of acknowledging my concerns with Steph Castle, I guess making an impact right out of the gate may have been overblown. Again, I don't know what to make of the shooting. It's cool when he has a 2 for 5 night, or like I said, whatever he was, 3 of 7 against the Jazz. And there's also just his finishing has been pretty good, I thought, as a rookie. There's when you say like Wemby, like him kind of screening for Wemby and then rolling, and like he's able to finish, like that's just like super fun to watch. So I'm going to say fact, just because I want to speak it into existence, that I think Steph Castle is having, I think you look at the efficiency and there'll be a lot of people that are like, no. But I think he's having, at least by the eye test, a better season than people are talking about.
Just to be contrarian, I'll go fiction, because that way I just get the field.
Who's the pick then? We need to hear it right now.
Risa, I believe in the shot, and he's going to get opportunity. I don't know. Like, if we come back to this in, like, I don't know, 3 more weeks, and McCain is still just playing 30 plus minutes a night and scoring like this, then I might have to change my tune.
Well, I might also ask who else on the Sixers is still injured, if that's
true. Everybody.
Next up, Grant, the NBA MVP race is already over because OG Anunoby has won it. No, because Nikola Jokic has won it. This man is unbelievable. He has won 3 MVPs, and you get to a point, and I think we've reached it with Giannis, where, okay, on certain nights, like when he drops 59 against the Pistons, it's, he can still surprise you. But you look at it and you say, like, you're numb to a lot of what happens. And then yet with Nikola Jokic, there's just like, you can't get numb to him, because he's doing something every night that is so utterly ridiculous. And I put this on Blue Sky the other day, is Has anyone ever in the same season won the scoring title, the rebounding title, and the assist title? I'm asking for Nikola Jokic. This dude leads the league in rebounds and assists, and he's like third or fourth in scoring. And even as some of the Nuggets, his kids have upticked, the Nuggets are still just more dependent on him than ever. He's logged 39 minutes or more 5 times this year, Grant. Do you know how many of those games he had last year? All of last year, 7. This dude is an Iron Man. This is someone who's had deep playoff runs. They won the title not last year, but the year before. He was carrying a team when Jamal Murray and Michael Porter Jr. were missing time. Now he just carries the team even when Jamal Murray's available, apparently. And you're just looking at what he's doing. He's hitting his threes at an astronomical clip. His 2-point percentage is dipped. Hey, but guess what, Grant? That still means he's shooting north of 55% on them. I look at him, and we love the net rating swings. It doesn't, you could filter it by playing time. I don't care. Context. Nikola Jokic just leads it. The Nuggets are about 30 points per 100 possessions worse when he's off the court. There is this belief that we've reached the point of voter fatigue with Nikola Jokic. And if you feel that way after watching the first part of the season, I really hope you do not have a vote, because there is no one else that you could make it. If the Bucks were good, I think Giannis on an individual level probably comes closest to having a case. I think you could throw Shea in there. Kevin Durant, I thought, had a very strong case before he was going to miss some time with a calf strain. I'm sure maybe he'll creep back in there. But like, this is fucking wild. This is someone who is the Nuggets are not, I don't feel the record and all. I don't want to say I feel worse about the Nuggets than ever. I will say they feel less convincing than they did a couple seasons ago. Maybe that's my bias against young players. Yes, I know Christian Brown might get most improved player votes, yada, 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 fun. But like, he is literally the one-man difference separating a championship contender from probably one of the worst teams of all time. And I don't think there's another player in the league that you can even come close to saying that about right now.
I would flip it the other way and say, like, make the argument against him, right? Like, what possible case could you make against Jokic today, right now, and we're projecting forward several months, just being the best player in the league and therefore deserving of MVP? Like, you can pick nits with every other candidate. I mean, Anthony Davis is a name we both have talked about early in the season as a candidate. Great. Like,
hate him.
You can't find anybody that has, and these are the two prongs of the MVP case. Like, how much we're trying to figure out what valuable means. How much do you mean to your team? Nobody means more than Jokic. And then if it's just show me the box score, nobody's better than Jokic. So just like, you can knock, Luka's not making shots, the defense is still iffy, whatever. I guess you'd say, Jokic's defense is still, break even at best or whatever.
I might even say it's better than that. I would go as far as to say I think it's been substantially better than that.
Right. No, I'm playing devil's advocate. Like, I'm trying to imagine the arguments that you would make against him being the MVP. I think the thing we just aren't, the voter fatigue thing is real. It sucks. I think in hindsight, it might feel like a mistake that he didn't win it 2 years ago and that we're not talking about a potential 5 straight MVPs for him. That he's the MVP if he stays healthy. And that's the other thing. Like, we're less concerned about him getting hurt than knocking on everything right now, than literally any other candidate. So it's just like, I don't know what the odds are, but it's like a Jokic or the field at this point. And I was like, I just took the field in the rookie of the year thing. I just think I would pick Jokic. I just don't see anybody else that has anything close to the same chance as him.
So I guess I'm with you, and I don't mean to declare it already over when the Nuggets are 10 games into their season, but for someone to catch him, what needs to happen? And let's not throw injuries out there. Is it like, so the Nuggets are 4th in the West right now as we record this. If they drop off of that, but it's not necessarily hit, like, the numbers are still incredible, does he have the ability to win it if they're like 6th or 7th in the West? If they fall that far, which, by the way, this is part of his MVP case right now, they haven't almost entirely because of him.
That is how he could lose it. And it would be bullshit, because there's no argument that if the Nuggets are underwhelming, they're a 500 team the rest of the way or whatever, and they don't finish, like, they're 7th in the West, 8th in the West, which is below. It's like the Westbrook line. Like, what were the Thunder 6th the year he won the MVP? Like that's kind of that seemed like, oh my God, but the numbers seemed undeniable at the time. I still don't think he was the MVP that year. That's another conversation. Like you won't be able to make the case that the Nuggets struggling has anything to do with Jokic. What you'll be able to say is like, well, they would have won 20 games this year without him, like that they won 41 is incredible. Like that he got them 20 plus win. So yeah, I think that'd be the case you'd make is if the Nuggets just aren't good enough as a team. We all care about team performance and determining value of an individual player, but there's not going to be a connecting line between the Nuggets underperforming as a team and Jokic. Like it'll be the opposite. It'll be like, it's incredible they were this good and he's the only reason why.
As someone who was skeptical over the Nuggets this season, I just can't, and even I'm never skeptical about Nikola Jokic, but wondering what their ceiling could be even with peak Nikola Jokic. And their ceiling might just be winning a title if he's going to be this good.
Yeah.
And I know they still had their issues. They're going to need more from a healthy Jamal Murray. Michael Porter Jr., he's come around, but like you're going to need him to be more consistent on the defensive end. Aaron Gordon needs to get help. But like even the anecdotal stuff is being set up for him to win the award because it's like just throw the numbers out of the equation. Now Aaron Gordon has missed time. Jamal Murray is banged up and he's continued to be uneven. And yes, okay, some of the kids, especially Christian Brown, are playing extremely well. And like you've gotten some really good traction out of Julian Strother, and Peyton Watson's even shooting 39% of his hitting 39% of his threes, But you look at it and you say, oh, so the Nuggets are relying on three. Christian Brown is probably more of someone who is a known quantity, but you're relying on a lot of people, including Westbrook and even some Hunter Tyson. And by the way, your backup center rotation is still dog shit because for some reason we gave Darius Garland the mini MLE, since apparently we just give that out like candy so that we can trade a bunch of picks to wash it off later, picks that they currently do not have. I digress on that though, but it's all setting up to where I just rattled off a bunch of reasons without going into them on why things could have just gone so wrong for the Nuggets. And there would have just been built-in excuses and the blame would have fallen on maybe Michael Malone, but probably Calvin Booth more than anyone, or the ownership, whatever.
Right.
And it's just like, no, you're winning in spite of this. Jokic is dominating and you have a better record than teams that a lot of people thought were just like Minnesota, Dallas. They're struggling out of the gate. And again, the Nuggets haven't been perfect, but they've won games. And Nikola Jokic is just like the fact that he might average over 30 points per game, or is because the players averaging more than him right now are Giannis, Anthony Davis, and LaMelo Ball. And that's it. And it's just, we know Jokic can score. He's one of the most, by the way, over the past half decade, if you view it in some, I'm not sure there's been a player who's just more clutch. Like when you look at actual crunch time numbers than him too.
He has the most clutch points this year. He's number one in clutch points this year. So like if you're talking about like who impacts winning, that was a lot of the Russ case years ago. Is like, look at his clutch. Like he won them 5 or 6 games down the stretch. Like
including in Denver. Do you remember that shot? That was like wasn't the framing the night the MVP race was over?
Right.
Westbrook get that shot in Denver.
I think last thing, it's just Jokic, and this isn't, I don't know if this is like a conventional way to make the MVP case, but it appeals to me. Like he just sets your team's floor so much higher than everybody else does, right? Because like it doesn't, to a greater extent than any other player, it doesn't matter who his teammates are. If he's playing, you just have a chance to win because he can just completely control the game in ways that no one else can. And like, you obviously look at the Bucks have Giannis. This is a low floor right now. As good as he's been, he just doesn't make everybody else the best version of themselves like Jokic does. He's not the world's like comfiest safety blanket like Jokic is. It's just you can't be bad if he's out there. And that's not true of anybody else.
And it feels such like a blasphemous thing to say in the vacuum, but I'm going fact here for a 13 second. The MVP race to me is just is over. And you're going to have to, I need you to outline the case. Oh, I would say I don't ascribe to this case, but if you are someone who has just always gone with the best player on the best team, that is the only thing that can undermine Jokic's case at this point. Because again, I don't agree with it, but if that's just how you view MVP, okay, fine. Well, then it's going to go to Shea at that point, or it's going to go to Darius.
I'd say congrats Darius Garland MVP if you're a best player.
That would be an interesting discussion to have, though, if there was just like, well, actually, we might be having it soon. So I'm going to go fact here. You're going fact as well.
Yeah, got to.
What are we up to, Grant?
Oh, look at this. Darius Garland, Dan, is the Cavs MVP, just Cavs MVP, not league wide, and going to make an all NBA team. Fact or fiction?
I don't want to go fact again, but I have to go fact here. He has been balling, and he's not going to have the same scoring numbers as a Donovan Mitchell, but he is very much driving the offense. And we did a deeper dive on Darius Garland, so we don't have to go too much into it, but he's shooting over 60% on drives. His passing out of them is better. His finishing is better. He looks, not only does he look craftier on the ball, he looks a lot faster on the ball. So he's getting around guys, and that sets up not only his finishing, but it helps set up the playmaking that he's doing. The shooting on the ball, off the charts. That in turn opens things up for both Donovan Mitchell, for Evan Mobley, for the Cavs to get away with how they sometimes space out Jarrett Allen and or Evan Mobley, depending on what the set's going to look like. This is, the spicier thing might be, is there a debate to where you say, well, who's been the Cavs' most valuable player this year? And we don't want to create strife from within because the Cavs are just rolling. But to me, he's been their MVP. And I don't want to say it's not close. And I really do. We talked about Evan Mobley's growth. Again, go back and check that episode. We did like 40 minutes on the Cavs or whatever it ended up being. But like the Mobley stuff, a lot of it's been opened up because of what you could do with Darius Garland away from the ball. And I just, to the extent to which, before I throw it to you, that Darius Garland feels like he's driving what the Cavs do on offense, despite Donovan Mitchell, I think, being better at, let's call it, reading the room on a functional basis, knowing what they need from him on a given night, or like how much does he need to dominate the offense on this possession, that possession. And then Evan Mobley just really, as a driver, as playing more physically, as someone like doing the face-up stuff, all great. And you could make a case that Evan Mobley and or Donovan Mitchell are all NBA candidates as well. But I look at Darius Garland as just the one who's driving more value for Cleveland right now than anybody else.
Yeah, I think there is a legitimate debate to be had just because Mobley and Mitchell have both been so good. And then you can't talk about the Cavs' success without going, like, Karis LeVert is playing about as well he's ever played. Ty Jerome is definitely playing
He's
as
apparently
well.
the most efficient pick and roll ball handler in basketball.
And is like a good defensively somehow now, like is getting steals, that's just contributing on both ends. Also incredible health up and down the Cavs, like top 8 guys.
But no, Max Strus hasn't played.
Well, I didn't even think about Max Strus. I'm talking about the guys that, Mitchell, Mobley, Garland, Allen have all played every game so far. Same with Okoro, same with Niang, same with Jerome. Sam Merrill's played 12. Wade and LeVert have played 11. Like, yeah. And then, like, yeah, where does Strus? Sorry, Max Strus. I don't know what we do with you now. I feel okay saying it's fact that Garland has been the Cavs MVP and that he's going to make an all NBA team. I think for me, it's more just like, and we can move on from the fact or fiction portion. Like, isn't it great though that we can like wash off the like, oh my God, what the hell happened to Darius Garland? Remember when he was an all-star and he was one of our like big up and coming picks, and he just broke his jaw, lost weight. A great article in The Athletic. Forgive me, I can't remember who. I just read it. Who wrote it? I'm talking about how Garland is way stronger this year, and he's like getting through screens, and he's making a defensive impact. And yeah, like he's actually up to his normal weight, and maybe got
happens when you can eat.
Last year. Like you try living through a straw for like several weeks and see how it affects your game. I know I always mention this, but like I don't feel like that gets brought up enough when people are talking about the bad year that he had. It's like
the bad year that still included like 20 points per game on shooting 37% from 3 or whatever. So
yeah, he's always kind of been one of my guys. I like him a lot. He has his limitations, or not this year, but has had them. I'm just happy that we're seeing like, oh yeah, no, Darius Garland is someone that's going to contend for all-star games all the time and is now like for sure in the all NBA conversation.
Yeah, that was an easy fact. We're going to get some fictions going on here, I think is the real. Maybe this is one, Grant. The Golden State Warriors are a real title contender without needing to make a trade. So as currently constructed with their 87-man rotation.
86 now. D'Anthony Melton got a sprained MCL. So it's a weird recipe because, as we've lamented since, I don't know, the last couple of years, they don't have, it's Steph Curry, and then there's not a star. There's no other star on the team unless you're going to just look at Draymond Green's impact and reputation and whatever. Like Andrew Wiggins isn't that guy. Jonathan Kuminga certainly hasn't been that guy. And then it's just a bunch of role players that play hard and defend and shoot a lot of threes. Like, Steph plus defense and threes is a pretty good recipe for being a very good team. The contention thing, like a real contention thing, you get the feeling that they're gonna be, now they've beaten both Boston and OKC, but don't you get the feeling that they're just gonna be overmatched talent wise against the best teams in a playoff setting? And the depth, obviously people have been saying all year, the depth is not something that you can rely on in a playoff scenario. I think you can be really good this way, and they have been, and I think they'll continue to be. But I don't know, maybe it's an old school way to think, but I feel like they need more top end talent that they can't really get right now because that guy's not available for the right price to really feel like an OKC Boston level contender.
I think I would agree with you, but the fact I remember saying coming into this season that they were more than one trade away from being a title contender. And now it feels like they are just one trade away. And it's not, to me, it's not even about the regular season. They could wind up being like one of the 3 or 5 best regular season teams. But you mentioned it, when you get to the playoffs and you need someone, we saw it when they had Kevin Durant, where it's like to have that extra guy just to break down the set defenses, to beat, if they're going up against more athletic teams where you need to beat some switching, and which, I mean, they beat Boston, so maybe it doesn't fucking matter. But like when a team like Boston has 7 games to plan around what you're doing, or even a team like OKC, that's where I think you need. I frame it as they need a second scoring option, but like a second primary scoring option. However, and this is where I'm going to throw it to you, I can't tell you, names have been thrown out there, and depending on how much they cost, I could talk myself into them. But like, what is the type? I don't even need, if you want to throw out a name, that's fine as to use as the comp. Like, what is the player that they need to enter serious title contention? What do they do? What is the general idea, the general function of this player?
So the cop-out answer is the type is the player Jonathan Kuminga thinks he is, which is just like the big combo forward / wing scorer that's hyper athletic, can't be guarded with one player, can get downhill
well off the bench, to his credit.
Yeah, I like he's been fine off the bench. I think the warts are still there. The athleticism, all the pluses and minuses are all just kind of where they've been with him. But that type, it's like, I don't know, Kawhi, like that kind of, or a decent version of Kawhi. I don't think it's and you could look at all the names we've trotted out forever of just like who's available: Jimmy Butler, Zach LaVine, Brandon Ingram. I think all those guys potentially help. I don't know that is like the type I would pick. So it's just the big combo forward wing, like maybe, or even to keep with the theme, like the type of player Andrew Wiggins was supposed to be when he was drafted, like that type of thing. You could also get a lot of mileage out of a quality, athletic, legitimately center-sized center that can be your role man, that can just dominate the offensive boards, block shots, like that kind of thing. Every big the Warriors play is undersized, or does not stretch. So it's that would go a long way. But we're also kind of maybe at the point where well, I'll throw it back to you. Is it possible that they don't need this like who Kuminga was supposed to be level star, and that if you made like something beyond a marginal improvement as a big guy or as like a good self-sufficient scorer, like that might be enough to make the Boston, OKC, whoever else fight like a little more fair in a 7-game setting?
So I guess it would depend on the route that you go, and I would view it through then 2 different lenses. And I'm going to throw it back to you. The first one would be, could you just get another big? Because it's all right. You have TJD, you have Draymond, you have Kevon Looney's been playing really well this year. You have the ability to downsize. We've seen good moments from Kyle Anderson, but you go out and get, it doesn't even need to be, I won't say properly sized, but someone who is bigger than any of the centers they have now, who top out at 6'7", 6'8". Well, how tall is TJD?
I think Looney is listed at 6'9". TJD, I think, might be listed at 6'9" or 6'10", but he doesn't.
Go out and get another.
Feels that way.
So TJD and Kevon, TJD at least looks like a center, I feel like, but go out and get someone who looks more like a center, you could say. So I would tell you, if let's say if you can guarantee he's going to be healthy the rest of the year, you can get it. It seems like he would fit the like the motif of this team in the sense that no one's really playing a ton of minutes and this guy can't. But if you could get Robert Williams the third, I'm not talking about giving up a first round pick for him, but if you just added him to this team without having to give up any of the core parts, do you think that's enough to, okay, now we have like our big to go with Draymond, and then when we want to mix and match or do other things, do you think that then now you're really leaning into, all right, like it's defense and we just have enough dynamism up front around Steph that this is going to work?
He's like right on the cutoff line. I think if you're talking about a healthy Robert Williams III that looks like Boston RW3 and that kind of thing, that gives them a like fly around, come from nowhere, block shots, dimension, like stash him on the corner guy like the Celtics did. Like you could get some real like dynamic contributions that, the Warriors current guys don't really provide. Is that enough? I don't know. It's close. That's an interesting name or interesting player type. I do think, just to sort of pivot a little bit, like you do have to assume that Buddy Hield's not going to make 46% on crazy volume from three going forward. Like, Draymond Green may not continue to make 46% on like more volume than he's had in several years like that. So that's all to say, I think as we're looking for help, it feels like it needs to come on offense. That's the thing I'm most confident of. I think the defense is just going to be this way all year. I just, it's hard to sustain the intensity with which they play, but because they just keep shuttling, high energy guys in and out of the lineup that are fresh, like you kind of can imagine them being this disruptive and frenetic over 82 games. So that's just to say the offense is just where we need to be focused, I think. So maybe that cuts against Robert Williams III, underrated passer when he's been healthy, but like, is it, you know what I mean? I think as I'm talking in circles, it does feel like you just got to get another guy or two that are going to be able to score in ways that are outside of this read and react, constant motion, chuck up threes and playoff Steph kind of offensive system.
And I agree with you. And so I'll break that into two parts. And so the Draymond without Steph minutes, those have actually been really good offensively, but the offense sucks without Steph overall, which I think proves two of the points is, okay, it needs to come on offense. And yes, this is a thing they need to worry about when you get to the playoffs, that we don't just get to, because I think, and I'll start with the bigger names. And so Jimmy Butler and Brandon Ingram are the two that are mentioned the most. I think both of those guys are imperfect fits. But like if you're the Warriors, because this invariably gets it, and we've already seen it. Someone got in our Wizards video clip that we did a deep dive into the Wizards, go check that out, was annoyed because they claimed the Warriors wouldn't give up 2 first-round picks for Brandon Ingram and Andrew Wiggins in a trade I proposed. I did not propose that trade because it only had 1 first-round pick. But if you're going to even take a flyer on someone like that, you are invariably going to have to give up, I would say, Andrew Wiggins because of just the salary he makes. And if you're going to get a Butler, certainly a Butler who's making like $50 million, but even a Brandon Ingram or even a player who's making, you can step ladder your way there if the player's 25 million. Okay, sure. But like a Zach LaVine would be another name. You're going to have to give up Andrew Wiggins. And I already kind of see like some of the pushback from Warriors. Like, why would we give up Andrew Wiggins for this player? And it's, you were the same fan base that just wanted him gone last year, number one. And number two is, if you want to get someone or something, you have to give up stuff. Like it's, and I think that's the dilemma they're going to run into. And so I have one other name that I think is off the beaten path for the most part, because I think that's how good this Warriors team is. But when you're looking at the Brandon Ingram and Jimmy Butler of it all, is there like, one, do you like either of their fits, or can you see either of those working out? And then two, if you had to max out, even don't worry about the package actually working, but like what is sort of the max offer for each? And we can take it one by one. So with Brandon Ingram, if it's Andrew Wiggins salary, so you're talking about, that's when you get into the D'Anthony Melton or the GP2 of it all. If it's Andrew Wiggins salary and a first round pick, is that a move you're considering? Or are you that, or not saying that this would be, I don't mean to say that like, oh, it's, if you wouldn't do this, it's out of control, but are you that worried about either Ingram's fit and or next payday that even something like a baseline like that is too rich?
Yeah, it's, I don't know, maybe this is that feels like the risk reward trade-off is still like, it's not a no-brainer that you do that. And I think maybe that'll surprise people, because Ingram is just a better offensive player than Wiggins. He does do the types of things I'm saying they need someone to do. Like him and Butler both, Ingram and Butler both are like, there's where you go for like a tough two when you got nothing else going on offense. They both get, Butler has been to my eyes, like quite diminished this year. And he's in age 35 season. That's going to happen. But I still would trust him to go get a tough 2 when the offense is broken down. Ditto for Ingram. Both of them come with contract issues, right? Because Butler's gonna, not a given, because he can get 50+ million by picking up his player option, but Ingram is gonna get or expect that $200 million deal. And like, then the question is, would you rather give up what you're talking about, a first and Wiggins, who, by the way, those same fans that wanted him gone last year, 2 years ago, were like, this guy's the greatest thing ever because he helped us win a title. So
look, we're all guilty of it. I just find it, one, if you're going to criticize a trade, at least get it right. That's what
that we agree on. That's a fact. What was I saying? Would you rather give up that stuff, know you're probably on the hook for $200 million for Brandon Ingram, or like maybe give Kuminga 28 a year going forward? I don't know. That's like not out of the question. I don't know if that trade-off quite makes sense.
Butler's more complicated because I think you can make the case that if he opts out, maybe he's kind of making the same, like he'll make less annually, I would assume, where it's probably like what Ingram, maybe it's in the $40 million range.
Yeah.
Who would you feel more comfortable paying for the next 2 years?
For 2 years? Man, I wish Butler had played a little better this year. I mean, we know what Ingram's going to do. Ingram's like at the point in his career where like he's this guy and added some 3-point volume. So maybe like there's even more upside.
Not so much efficiency on that 3-point.
No, right. But he's getting them up. I don't know. 2 years is like, Butler, you want age 36 and 37 out of Butler, who hasn't stayed healthy through any of his 30s. I guess I would default to Ingram just because I don't think Butler's going to return value in terms of like volume.
I would too, because even if you told me to vacuum, okay, give up Kuminga and a first round, I'd probably give up in a vacuum more for Jimmy Butler. But when you look up how much more it needs to be, where, okay, the baseline of Kuminga and a first, maybe a swap. I'm not as high on Kuminga as you are, but like that's a deal.
Well, that's been a real roller coaster, Dan, for me. Yeah. I don't know where I'm at right now.
That's a deal I would do in a vacuum, but Butler makes so much that you get into, okay, well, Wiggins needs to go out. And then it's, well, you're going to have to give up 2 of GP2, DeAnthony Melton, and Kyle Anderson when the trade restrictions on the other 2 guys lift. So I would default to Ingram too. But I'm saying I don't know that they need to go the star route. If Zach LaVine made, not that he's not a star, but if he made less, I would be banging the shit out of that drum, because I think they need kind of that similar archetype of player where can you generate your own looks sometimes? Yes. Can you be a secondary? I won't call it table setter because you're not necessarily, that's not someone who's going to pass guys open, but can you make passes off the live dribble? Yes. Can you then just play off the ball and play really well off the ball? Yes. There is someone that I believe checks all 3 of those boxes, Grant, that makes about half of what Jimmy Butler makes. Not a name I've seen mentioned, and if it has, I apologize. I haven't consumed that content then. Can you guess who he is?
I have no idea. I'm intrigued. This guy's clearly underpaid if he's making half of that.
He is Jalen Brunson. No, he is Anthony Simons. Feels like if you don't want to go the star route, if you don't want to give up a boatload to where it's, they're going to have to give up something. It's probably a first-round pick, and I don't know why the Blazers want Kuminga. Am I at the point where would you trade Kuminga for Anthony Simons?
Oh, God. You're hurting my brain. If I'm the Warriors, would I trade Kuminga for Anthony Simons?
I'm assuming probably not, because Kuminga fills I think he's like a pure 4, which is why he's up probably wide to value, because I'm not a big fan of the one position guys, except for shooting guards, apparently, that they're coming back. But if you're the Warriors, though, the theory of this would be it's going to cost you picks. Maybe it costs you Moses Moody, too, who's playing well this year in a bigger part of the rotation. But this rotation is, I can't name a player. I can name Lindy Waters as part of this trade. People are going to be mad. It's like there's just everyone in Golden State basically plays. So if it's just, all right, we're going to have to give up the equivalent of 2 first-round picks, and one of them is going to be this year's first-round pick, and the other one could either be a player, like whether it's not going to be Pods. I don't think it's going to be Kuminga. But if you can get Anthony Simons, I think that makes a big enough difference. And you can even step ladder your way to Anthony Simons, where if you really wanted to, you could build a package that doesn't have Andrew Wiggins in it. Yeah,
you could do it with the loonies and GP2s and what, you could cobble some stuff togetger.
But then man, I'm Blazers fans will make it. Why would we want GP2 back? And it's these
the Warriors and Blazers just keep ping-ponging GP2 back and forth. That just for fun. I don't know if we've gotten any closer to. Well, we need to rein this in. Anthony Simons is a fascinating name. I'm going to need to sleep on that one. Because all I'm thinking about is is he capable of playing? Even Buddy Hield has like been running his ass off defensively and like trying hard and stuff. I don't know if Simons is that. I mean,
No,
no,
he's not.
Well, you might just get into the system and be like, well, you never would have said Buddy Hield was going to play like this. So like, I don't know, maybe it's just there's some magic juju the Warriors are sprinkling on everyone, so they try hard on defense.
But I guess so then to wrap up this portion of it would be, so we're in agreement that they do need an offensive infusion. But if you are going to go the non-star route, would you prefer them to set their sights even lower where it's okay, Anthony Simons makes sense. We think the defensive infrastructure to hold up around him, but he's still in that $25 million range.
Right.
And it's like, we need someone who's even cheaper than that if we're going to go the non-star route.
Yeah, he's kind of right in that weird middle zone. I think you probably go cheaper and like go back to the Robert Williams type. Like you're maybe not going to address the wing thing. But the more we talk about it, the more it does just, if you're going to do this, it needs to be a swing big enough to say like, okay, now we cannot say Steph doesn't have a premium second scoring option next to him.
That's what gets so difficult though, because if you're
not available, I don't think the perfect guy's not available. So I think my ultimate takeaway or ultimate response is like, yes, this is fiction. They're not a real title contender without a trade. But the guy that they should that they could trade for to turn their contention into a fact isn't available right now. Or I don't love, we've just bandied these different players back and forth several times. I'm not in love with any of it. So I think maybe that's just like, wait, I guess. And like, look, the longer they pile up wins playing this style and getting like, quote unquote, getting away with it, the more patience they can afford to have. Cause you still have
bought themselves optionality, both in terms of patience and the level of player or type of player they need to target.
Mm-hmm.
We have another Warriors one. Well, Warriors related one here, Grant, and I'm going to steal it because it's still Warriors related. Draymond Green should be the defensive player of the year favorite over Victor Wembanyama. Fact or fiction?
Man, so I know you've got the on-off stuff, which is, again, I'm going to be dismissive of it even before you mention it. But Draymond Green is looking energized, like the game against Dallas, just, and has mostly stayed within the realm of like rational on-court behavior. So that's a plus. If you're talking about defensive player of the year favorites, you do, having said that, need to factor in the possibility of suspension at some point. And for him, because they keep considering past actions, like his suspensions aren't going to be short, right? Like if he hauls off and slugs somebody or puts someone else in a chokehold, like it's not going to be 5 games. So he might just lose his eligibility, like out of the, by one dumb act. He's been really good. He's not the rebounder or rim protector or athlete he was obviously in his prime, but okay. That's to be expected. I do still think he is the central figure of this defense, even if the numbers are going to show it's more of a committee approach. Having said that, Wemby, like it just, the shot deterrent and shot, altered data, which I know you have, is insane. He's leading the league in blocks and at 3.8, and it feels like that's just that he's not going to be below that at any point going forward. I think we got to stick with our priors a little bit and just maybe he's not going to run away with it like we thought. I still think he just needs to be the favorite. So I would go fiction if it's Draymond should be the favorite over Wemby.
I am going fiction as well, but I feel uneasy about it because the on-off stuff says that Golden State's defense is substantially better when Draymond is off. Mm-hmm. Draymond also plays in lineups where he's going to be compromised a little bit more inherently because if Steph Curry's on the court for one, but like you look at the Warriors, they're better off with Draymond Green defense. Like that, there's certain things where the on-off data matters, but like if it's clearly, like if it's saying that the Warriors are better off defensively without Draymond Green, start digging into the lineups. Like these secondary lineups are probably playing against inferior secondary lineups. Mm-hmm. It's so interesting but you look at Wemby, and so it's like, okay, the Spurs, 82nd percentile of defensive efficiency with him on the court. And I think what's most impressive about that is I would make the case that he has less defensive talent around him than Draymond Green does, where it's like, if you're getting this version of Andrew Wiggins and what we know about Anthony Melton was he was healthy and having GP2 and having someone like a TJD or the way that Kevon Looney's played this year, like that's a real defensive supporting cast. And with the Spurs, it's Wemby logs most of his minutes with Chris Paul and Julian Champagny and Harrison Barnes and Jeremy Sohan beforehand, and Steph Castle before he was injured, excuse me. Steph Castle plays a bunch. Now, a lot of those guys, you look, Sohan can do stuff defensively. I think Julian Champagny's had a really good year for them. Steph Castle's very good defensively for a rookie, but he's a rookie. And so I think that's what impresses me the most. And then you look at just the level of impact he's having on the other team where, and I don't think this is inferior. I would argue that it sometimes feels like, or I wouldn't argue. I think it's just a fact Draymond Green's role is harder because he's kind of responsible for doing a bunch of stuff, but then making sure everybody else is doing a bunch of stuff and tying it all together, where Wemby is just the one-man system unto himself by virtue of disruption and deterrence.
Yeah.
And you mentioned the shot blocking. Teams are shooting 16 percentage points worse at the rim as a team when he's just on the floor. They're taking about 4 percentage points less of their shots at the rim when he's on the court. He's holding opponents to under 35% shooting at the rim while contesting the second most shots at the rim per game. That is, and I think when they look at Draymond and he wears, I would say, more hats, but Wemby this is not the Brook Lopez Defensive Player of the Year case, which again, he had a case. Wemby, some of these rim protection possessions, they begin with him like guarding beyond the arc and he's just coming back and he's ending shots that way. So I actually did not pick Wemby to win Defensive Player of the Year. I had Bam Adebayo, and that is a prediction that has aged like milk. Draymond Green has a case, and it's interesting. We're so early in the season that things could change. Like, does something happen with the Spurs where is Wemby playing less down the stretch, or does the defense deteriorate around him for some reason? I think he's the answer right now. I think these are very clearly the top two. Maybe Evan Mobley might deserve some shine here for what he's done with Cleveland. I struggled to come up with other names, though.
Yeah, I think Holmgren had a case before getting injured.
Yeah.
We can rule him out now. But yeah, it's a short list.
Could you remind us who ranks fourth in defensive?
Yeah, in the obvious king of all stats, defensive box plus minus with no flaws with it whatsoever. That's our guy, Jalen. I'm gonna say he's our guy because I'm in
the bag for him, but I think you would die for him. I think that's what the difference is.
Yeah, Jalen Williams, just number 4 in defensive box plus minus. Should be noted 4 Thunder players are in the top 9, and that is indicative of why that stat might not need to be trusted. Although the Thunder's defense is very good.
There's only 4.
I find it's hard for me to, I forget who the 4th, because Cason Wallace is 1, J-Dub, Chet, he's obviously going to fall out, or he won't actually, because that's a rate stat. Anyway, I just want to say about Wemby before we move on. I think like the rim protection numbers and just like the conversion rates when he's designated as the defender at the rim and the way he suppresses attempts, to me, when we are evaluating Wemby over the last couple of years, we're always talking about like he's going to change things, or like we've never seen this before. This is like, we've been very positive, but it's always like I don't really know what it means to have a guy this big that moves this way. And I think that's the rim protection stuff is really our first, because that's it's an absurd number. Like it's like the league average in 3-point shooting, except it's at the rim when he's around, right? Like that's just like that's unheard of. So I think this is the first like really good. Now, some people might say, actually, it's him making 6+ threes in 3 straight games and getting 50 and shooting like 18 of 29 or whatever. Like that's the sign that, he's different, or like, we're going to see things we've never seen before. I think it's the rim protection stuff. Like he's just going to impact scoring by the opponent.
He's taking away the most valuable shot in the game of basketball
in ways nobody really ever has. And nothing to me about it feels like phony, just because then let's jump to the eye test. It's like guys just don't challenge him. The offense is completely like just veer away. And it's not like, okay, well, he's over here, so let's go over here. It's like, no, he's kind of everywhere just because of the length. So there's like no safe place to be if he's out there if you're trying to shoot it. I think I just am increasingly convinced that like this is the first pretty clear sign of we're going to have to sort of reevaluate what we think is possible from a defensive impact standpoint because of him.
I don't want to dismiss Draymond's case.
No, I don't either.
The case that we have, but I will say, because the defensive playmaking, that's something, or the numbers, the counting stats, the blocks, the steals, like those always make people want to watch. Because when people say that, the people are like, man, I really enjoy watching Delano Banton navigate screens on defense. Like, congratulations for letting us know that you watch the Blazers. That's why you said that. Like, fine. Okay, great. But Draymond Green, and he's averaging a block and a steal per game. So he has counting stats, but he's legitimately, and I'm like, this isn't sicko stuff. He's legitimately fun and entertaining to watch on defense, despite not being the traditional counting stats disruption guy, because of the way he either actually navigates the floor, but is also directing everything else. And I can't say enough that certainly in my lifetime, I've never watched a better defensive player on a regular basis. But the fact that he's still doing this at the age of 34, that shouldn't factor in. It was like LeBron should win MVP because he's good at the age of 30. No. Like, that's not how this works. But the fact that he might be or is one of the 3 most valuable defensive players in basketball after all these years still, that's fucking crazy.
Well, and it's a testament to, I mean, if you're going to make the case for Draymond, it's rooted in that, which is like, he's very much the orchestrator. Like, and I don't know if I'm biased, but he's the best defensive player I've ever seen. And I think
I'd like to throw someone else into that equation. Opposing pick and roll ball handlers are only scoring 0.31 points per possession against Moses Moody. So is he really the driving force?
He's really the key.
Yeah.
I think it's unfair to Wemby because like it's his second year and Draymond might be the smartest defensive player we've ever seen. And so Draymond is able to control the defense like from a mental standpoint and a tactical standpoint in ways like, well, of course, Wemby can't do that. He's been in the league for less than 100 games. Like that's just not something you can expect from him. So the Draymond case is just like the level of control he exerts over the game, like with his mind and with his like experience and stuff, is just on a very, very different level than Wemby, who's just all incredible physical tools and mobility and stuff.
These have been some heavy ones. We need like a nice little lighter one. Oh, never mind.
Well, okay. I'll read this. I can't remember what order we're in. The Miami Heat no longer have a player capable of being the best player on a contender. So we might need to define contender. Like we're talking in the same terms as the Warriors, like where you're on the Boston OKC level, not, co-favorite type thing, or like wouldn't be shocked if they won a title. Like let's define contender before we get fact or fiction here.
I would even, can we frame it another way where it's, you look at the Bucks, they're not a championship contender, but do you think that Giannis Antetokounmpo can still be the best player on a championship contender?
Yep, I do.
I look at the Heat, kind of in the same vein. They're not a championship contender in large part because they don't have a player who can be the best on a championship contender. And I don't mean to make this an indictment of anybody. I think Bam is a fantastic basketball player, probably one of the single most valuable defensive players in the postseason that you could cook up in a lab.
Yeah.
He has never been someone who's been able to carry the offense independent of Jimmy Butler and actually run stuff through. The grab and go stuff is fun. The stuff that he is able to do off the dribble, facilitate for others is fun. It has historically not driven a ton of efficient offenses independent of someone who is much better than him. Now it looks like, you already mentioned this, I think like twice throughout this podcast, the Jimmy Butler decline feels real. And like we've seen him flip the switch this year, but it's flipped the switch for 25% of the game, which is just not going to cut it. And so not everyone, but I still don't really know what to make of the Heat. Tyler Herro's having a fantastic season, and not that it doesn't matter, but I look at it and say, okay, well, how much does it really matter to this team if they don't have the number one guy? I'm not even saying on a team. This is, I guess, what you were getting at of how do we define contender? I'm not like, do they even have someone who could be the best player on a top 3 seed in their conference? And we're talking about the East here.
Yeah, no. So I think your framing is right. This isn't really about like, what does it mean to be a contender? It's just a question ultimately of like, how good are Jimmy Butler and Bam Adebayo, like in a vacuum? Like, could you put them on a team and surround them with, you don't get to say, okay, well, Bam's your center, but then you also have, 4 other starters that are like all NBA contenders, but not, you know what I mean? Like that just on a regular or above average team. And
yeah, if Jimmy Butler and Bam are on Boston, they're set.
Yeah, yeah, right. If you give them, you don't even need Tatum. If you give them Jalen Brown and Derek White and Drew Holiday, you got a real team. I think that's right, because we're just really what we're saying is like neither of these guys is in the conversation as a top 10 guy. Like not even really close, right? Like, and at the moment, Butler's not an all-star. Butler's not a top 25 guy. Now, if he does do the Jimmy Butler thing where he's just better in the playoffs, then yeah, okay.
Are they getting there?
That's the thing. Like you can't just do that anymore because what you're doing in the regular season is so far below even the B+ effort level that he's put in the past. So, I mean, just the numbers, Dan, like 16 a game from Butler, making his twos okay, shooting fewer threes than last year, making 15% of them, doesn't like just age 35 season. So athletically, he's not able to do all the same things he was from an individual scoring standpoint. So this is a pretty easy fact, right? Like these guys aren't top 10, top 15 players at the moment.
No, and I think that's the Heat's problem where, okay, could they, if you're now, I think both of them could still be all-stars, but the Heat, to me, their problem is, and Tyler Herro, they could, if you told me.
We just made Tyler Herro an all-star, so they got
right.
3.
So you could have 3 all-star caliber players, but they still need, if they wanted to contend with the Clevelands, the Boston, the OKCs, whatever team Jokic has around him, the Denver Nuggets, maybe we should trade Jokic. But in all seriousness, if you even want to contend with, let's go to the second tier contenders, where it's the Nuggets, the Wolves, who I still believe in. We both believe in them. We're going to get to the Wolves and Mavericks. Actually, the Heat need a new best player. And that's kind of a harrowing place to be in.
Yeah. How do they get it? You're not getting it by trading Butler.
By the way, I don't view this as an indictment of Bam Adebayo, because I think it's just been pretty clear that, yeah, he could be your second best guy, but that's not. So this isn't, if people are taking it as an insult to Bam, I think like if you put Bam on Boston instead of Tatum, is he their best player? They're probably still a contender, but is he their best player, or is it become Jalen Brown at that point?
Right. Yeah. I think the hierarchy changes if you do that.
I don't know how they go about. They could trade, I think, up to 2 first-round picks this year. They have some swaps, and I guess Tyler Herro is more valuable than ever. But that puts them in just a really rickety spot, which is why they should probably be. This leads into the separate discussion of, I'm not a big they need to tear it down guy, and I'm not even saying they need to tear it down, but I don't understand the theory of Jimmy Butler on this team anymore moving forward.
Like, I think you got to trade him. That's one of my pretty. I've come around pretty quickly to that. It's like I just forget the contract situation and worrying about losing him for nothing, or I don't know what's worse, him picking up that $50 million option, or you're losing him for nothing. That what you're talking about is really the core of it. Like, he isn't that guy anymore. It doesn't look like. Maybe this changes. At the moment, he certainly doesn't look like that level of player. So then what are you doing? Because Bam can't be that. Like, Bam's great, we love him, he can't be that. So, and
by the way, it's like he's had some weird like defensive performances this year. It feels like they're trying to skew him more towards a traditional big. That's just not. I mean, his rim protection numbers and the stuff he was doing in drop last year was incredible. But and maybe I just haven't seen enough of the Heat, but as his baseline, like, no, like Bam Adebayo needs to be Bam Adebayo. And yeah, but great opponents are shooting. In my head, I had this number. It was actually lower, and it's higher than I thought. 77.5% against Bam Adebayo at the rim.
That's not his game. Like, he's a top 5 DPOY guy every year because he's one of the best switch defenders in the league, and is super. He's just never been that. It's not that
last year he was, though.
He was better.
Yeah,
and he's averaging more blocks this year. That's partly because of the way they're using him. He is closer to the basket. That's just going to happen. But like, that's not the Bam Adebayo hang your hat like skill.
Do you think that speaks to a level of distrust in what's in front of him now, in a way where it's okay, Butler got older, we lose Caleb Martin, and it's, I think you could argue, should Haywood Highsmith be playing more minutes than he is? But like, does that just speak to, we don't trust what's in front of him, so like we need Bam Adebayo around the basket more?
I think that has to be it, because you wouldn't look at his body of work over his career and say, like, we should mess with this. Like, we should do something other than have him do what he's best at. It's just like it's by necessity, right? And they're having him play in ways that are not best for him because he can still do it, and it's best for the personnel around him. I think that's dead on. So
we're both going fact here.
Yeah.
I think this next one will be a lighter one. No, of course. This is yours too. My God, man. I'm reading. It's my turn to read it. Karl-Anthony Towns is a better All-NBA bet than Jalen Brunson. I'm not going to call fact or fiction. I'm going to call bullshit.
I'm just trying to trigger you.
Jalen Brunson's been off to a rocky start. Well, how about you make the case here are you going fact or fiction?
Well, let's see. If I'm gonna do what you said first. I'm gonna try to make the case before we render a ruling here. So Towns, we've joked, like, or I have, with several players here, he's making half his threes. Like, Towns actually is making half his threes. He's over 50% from deep. Now the volume still is like, I'd love to see him at 40% on 10 attempts as opposed to 50% on 5. Like, that's I like the math a little better that way. But he is leading the Knicks in scoring, despite not leading them in shots. He's leading him in rebounds, 12.2, 3 assists, has just been smoking the Vucevic's and the Brook Lopez's on the conventional centers of the world that opponents put on him because he just puts it on the floor and drives. Like that's, and you defend him with smalls, he's going to score in the post. He's a huge matchup problem. I think this is kind of my favorite version of Towns that I've seen since like way back when we, maybe a second, third year when it seemed like this guy might be a top 5 player at some point.
25 points as a sophomore on like ridiculous efficiency.
Oh yeah. And this was before it was like, wow, before the days where lots of guys his size shoot threes and it seemed like such an anomaly that he could do that. Let's see, what else would I say to make the case? That's probably about it. I mean,
it would have to be more about Jalen Brunson not continuing to get better. And I think we've seen the offense, as always, though, with the Knicks, even when Jalen Brunson's at his best, it feels like it always deteriorates later in games. But this year it's been bad. They're still bottom. I think they're below league average in fourth quarters offensively. That's with me filtering out the Celtics game. Maybe it would help that garbage time, their offensive rating in fourth quarters. I kept it in. Their crunch time offense, Grant, bottom 3. Jalen Brunson, he has struggled, but he's also hurt them in the sense that I don't think the Knicks have actually made his life any easier other than giving him more space to operate. Maybe the latest version of Karl-Anthony Towns does make it easier, but really, I think Jalen Brunson has struggled, and it's the argument for this would be he will continue to struggle because Mikal Bridges is not the player who they thought they were acquiring, would probably be the real way to frame this. But I think he's gotten a little bit better of getting off the ball slightly quicker, not over dribbling as much. And that was uncharacteristic of him last year. Yeah, they needed him to dribble a lot and create, but he was operating in such tight confines. You understood it. This year, he's like kind of dribbling to nowhere more often, where it's like he's holding the ball too long. He's not seeing guys that he normally would. He's not spraying out like he should be. Now, again, is this about the change in the roster? Does he not trust these guys? Some of them at points, including Towns, have been passive. Like Josh Hart, past the 3-point shooter, at least attacks off the dribble. It feels like OG Anunoby, Mikal Bridges, not Towns so much right now, but they seem reticent to like really attack in those ways. But I think the offense overall, it's gotten better. And I think Jalen Brunson is going to continue to get better. And just knowing that the Knicks are only going to go to where they want to, which is to say like top 2 or 3 in the East, if Jalen Brunson's a top 10 player, I have to call fiction on this because I just don't. And also, Karl-Anthony Towns has done, Jalen Brunson's newer to overall stardom, but Karl-Anthony Towns' track record speaks for itself, where yes, he's a star, but he's a human roller coaster. It feels like he can still vanish on the offensive end. And sometimes that's about teams not getting him involved enough. Other times it's about him being too passive. And I also think his defensive miscues are always going to stand out more than Jalen Brunson because no one expects either of these guys to be really good. But when you're big man and your primary big man is not good, or he has a bad game, or he's even up and down to where it gives you the glimpse of like Towns, well, we know what he can do, but he's not doing it every night on every possession. That's going to hurt him more than it's going to hurt Jalen Brunson.
I think this has to be fiction because I would go real simple. Cat cannot play better than this. Like that's just full stop. He can't, it's not possible. Like I haven't looked, I guarantee you no one has ever averaged 26 and 12 and made over half his threes on 5 attempts again. Like that just isn't in the statistical record.
If they still had positions. That might've been his ticket in where there's really only 3 center spots, but like
that would have been
at this point after Jokic, I guess if AD's a center, we can say Sabonis has been good. I'm probably forgetting someone, aren't I? That's been really
well. Normally you talk about Bam. It's not going to be Bam.
It's not Bam. It's not going to be Embiid. Yeah. So, but yeah, fiction here. What do we have next? This one's going to be yours to read.
Okay, Dan. Ben Simmons, expiring contract, but is playing basketball fairly regularly these days. Will be traded, and that's the reason that's an interesting factor. Fiction, if you find it interesting, is because that seems who wants that deal, and just he'll be a buyout or he'll just play out the string.
And that's what's interesting because the Nets, you could also take the slant of, well, if they want to get value, you send out because they're shrinking. My point is you're shrinking their suitors even more because we don't expect that they want good players back to where, what if we could get Zach LaVine by giving up Ben Simmons? No, you don't. They're winning too many games as it is, if like for what their plan is. So you're saying that a team wants to get rid of a contract. And so what is the contract that, Zeke Naji doesn't fit into this? Sorry, Nuggets fans, like Ben's a little too expensive.
Poor Zeke.
but Dario Saric doesn't fit into this either. You could aggregate, still won't work. But like, what is the contract that is not that it's so bad, but that is bad enough to say, okay, we want, because again, it's not unless the Nets are going to zig or zag when we expect them to zig and be like, no, we want good players, so we'll use this expiring contract to get them. What's the contract you look at or contracts and say, well, it makes sense to send Ben Simmons' expiring contract here just so they can get out from under that money?
This is the problem. Have we run out of like egregiously horrible NBA contracts? I guess like, because you normally point to someone like Beal. Not that I'm saying this is a Simmons trade candidate, but I'm just looking like, what are the deals where everybody's like, yeah, that guy's
good enough to where it's the only thing that's annoying is he has the no trade clause right now. So
yeah,
I'm trying to think of the deals.
It's hard. Like you used to be able to say, "Oh, Tobias Harris is grossly
What about that
overpaid."
Franz Wagner extension? Too soon?
Oh man, yeah, because the Magic really do need another non-shooting defense first.
Oh, here's the deal.
Oh,
but you'd have to send someone else back, and he's not trade eligible yet. But like the Bulls got to be thinking about getting off that Pat Williams contract, right?
Oh man, why are they?
Wait, what does he have? What does he have in year 5, Grant? I can't remember.
Is it a team option? Is it a team option, Dan?
No, is it? It's a player option. Yeah, he needed a player. Yeah, he
got to give it to him. Got it. The negotiating, it was a bidding war. You just had to beat the 10 other teams that were gonna, that tried to go 5 years straight. He's like, no. Come on, Bulls. What are you gonna give me?
Ooh, I think I have one. And this is just, I don't know if they would do it because you would have to include other salary. Would you want to get out of the final year of Marcus Smart's contract if you could? And so, like, is there another? I think you'd probably have to increase your payroll this season, though, because he's at about 20, 21. What is Ben Simmons at? Is he at 36? So he's at 36. So, like,
if it's all,
is he at 40? Then forget it.
I have 43 in my head. Let me look it up. I should have done this before.
He hasn't played in like consistently in so long. I don't know what he's going to make dollar for dollar. And I normally know these things.
Yeah, I know. So all right, I'm going to get it. You vamp.
So I don't need to vamp. My actual point would be if he's making that much money to where, all right, you want to get out of the final year of that Marcus Smart deal, but do you even view, let's say, Luke Kennard as it, or do you want to get out of the Clark and Smart deals? And it's Clark and Smart for Ben. What is Ben Simmons making? You found it?
40.3.
So I think you could technically do that, but you would still have to include, if you're Memphis, part of the point would be, well, if you could do that in a vacuum. Wait, he is at 43? I'm sorry, what?
40.3.
Oh, God. So does that framework interest you at all, where if it's Brandon Clark and Marcus Smart for Memphis, to where we just have this deal and it's going to give us more flexibility to pay some of these other guys moving forward? I'm struggling.
I'm getting a first if I'm getting, well, that's the other thing. If I'm Brooklyn, I'm doing this because I want picks, right? Because I'm taking on these longer contracts.
Then no, this is fiction. Because if I'm Memphis, I'm not giving up a first to get off just those guys. Like I would want, well, give me Dorian Finney-Smith instead, and then that changes the whole complexion of the trade.
That's where it's hard, or if it becomes a fiction, because if you're the Nets, what all you want is this money. You're willing to take on bad money, or I think you should be, with a pick that might turn into a high lottery pick. And it's hard for me to imagine, because we just went through that, like, where are the contracts that teams are like, we have to get off this money and we'll give up a pick to do it. Like, I don't know where those are.
And I think a big part of that is, one, a lot of these deals are shorter unless you're Patrick Williams. And also just free agency has changed, and maybe it comes back, but like, it behooves you more to have a contract that you can send out in a trade, because then that's something, as long as it's not terrible as a salary anchor to match money, because we very rarely see, even if you overload teams with draft equity, we very rarely see there's no players or salary whatsoever involved.
Yeah, it's weird too. Like, this is like there's a certain archetype of a trade where it's what we're talking about, where a team that signed a regrettable long-term deal that will give up draft equity to get off of it, and like a player in Simmons' position, an expiring big salary would have been desirable, because okay, we're going to reset. The problem is the Nets are kind of a reset team, and then also, like, I'm trying to think this is bad potting, but like, what's the last time we had a trade where it was clear that the motivation on one side was to just get off this deal? It might be like, because we're done with all the 2016 contracts, all those crazy ones with the cap spike. Like, I know there have been some. Maybe people leave these in the comments or let us know. Like, I can't remember the last, like, we just have to get off this deal move. I guess it's Beal, maybe. Like, is that the last one?
Yeah, and that was even sort of like he gave them a list of one destination, so it wasn't kind of that they wouldn't have, I don't think, taken the approach of let's just get off this deal unless he forced them to type of situation.
Yeah.
So
they're not as common as it seems like they used to be.
Well, here's one, but this might fall too far into did they get a good player? You want to get off a contract. We were just talking about him. If he's going to pick up that player option, Ben Simmons and like Zaire Williams for Jimmy Butler, Miami wants to get out of that deal. I'm kidding. I'm tongue cheeking there for anyone who didn't catch that. But yeah, I'm going to call fiction here because I don't, if the Nets wanted to get like, let's use Zach LaVine as an example where, okay, maybe the Bulls don't want that contract, but the Nets they're not going to trade him for nothing at this point, I wouldn't think. And the Nets like, hey, we'll give you a first round pick. Like, and but they're just not in a, I might call fact here, but I don't think they're on that type of trajectory.
You think he's going to get bought out or he'll just play the season and be a free agent?
Ooh, I think he'll play the season and be a free agent.
Yeah.
Just because, I mean, man, imagine if he because if he gets bought out, so a lot of the teams he can't go to because he's making more than the mid-level.
Exactly.
Like where does he end up? And how much money is he giving back would also be the question.
If I'm him, I'm like, you're paying me every penny of this contract because he can't be sure.
Like 65% on twos this year. I mean, they might just want to.
For him, he's been like okay. He's been the most efficient from the field he's ever been. Just 7 assists. Like he still is just like, please look at the basket once in a while. Like it's just infuriating to watch him, but I don't know how he gets as many assists as he gets. Anyway, let's move on.
Grant, the Rockets will finish with a top 6 seed in the Western Conference, fact or fiction?
Well, right now they have one, and there are a couple teams we'll talk about eventually here that you would have pegged to be pretty comfortably above them that are not. Man, it's right on the border. As I look at it, so let's look at who's below them right now as the Rockets sit 5th. You have Minnesota and Dallas. Those are the main, like, okay, well, we assume they're going to be better. Sacramento is below. Memphis is below. The Lakers are below. So, and I don't think anyone would say that the Rockets are likely to finish ahead of Denver, Phoenix, Golden State, OKC, all of whom are ahead of them. So we're going to need we're going to need 2 teams to jump them. We can talk about what's going well about the Rockets. My gut reaction is just this is fiction because I think there's too many good candidates to jump them. And that's the short answer. Now, this is a trade candidate team that might be one of the, on the short list.
Don't tell Rockets fans that.
Well, I know, but look, I think it's a good thing because if I'm Houston, I really want Amin Thompson and Tari Eason, who we've got featured in the graphic here conveniently, to just play with Smith, Şengün, and Jalen Green, just to kind of see what their defensive insanity could do in a starting group with all those other young guys. So you're trading Van Fleet or Dylan Brooks, I think, in that scenario. Total hypothetical, but that's a good problem if you're ready to move off of veterans because all your young guys are ready to play together this quickly. I don't see, just give me Minnesota and Dallas as my 5th and 6th teams in the West right now. And then Houston 7, and then there's some other options. So I can't quite get there, even if I'm very much encouraged by almost everything that Houston's done so far.
I think it's fiction too. And we have a second type of Rockets one after this. I just think it's the math game here. And it's super impressed what they're doing on defense. Amin Thompson's a monster. Tari Eason's a psychopath. I think Alperen Şengün has improved a lot defensively over the past couple seasons as well. I don't trust their offense. They're fine, in terms of raw efficiency relative to where their defense is, but you're 29th in effective field goal percentage. You have a lot of players are missing wide open threes at this point. You're not shooting well from 3 overall, and I don't know how invested they are in improving that because I know he shot poorly to start the season. Cam Whitmore doesn't get a lot of minutes, and then the bigger one would be Reed Shepherd, who I was listening to. Someone's complaining that he's not taking enough threes. And I guess all right, 5.6 per 36 minutes isn't a lot, but when you have this dude on the court, how do you want him to take more than 2 attempts per game when he's not on the court for a consistent amount of time? So if they're not really invested in kind of drumming up the shooting, I do think there are things they could do organically. Rockets fans were mad, by the way. I proposed a Jae'Sean Tate and Jock Landale for Duncan Robinson swap. My thought process being like get Duncan Robinson on this team. And then because you've punted on cap space, most likely, now we just have that $19 million Duncan Robinson salary using a trade next year. And they were fuming. And I'm just like, all right, I didn't care enough to read it. Someone kept tagging me in it. So my whole thing is, and I don't have a problem with them saying we're just going to ride with these guys. We'll figure stuff. Like they're at a weird point where they're so good, but like we're in what, year 2? Oh, is this year 2 or 3 of Ime Udoka? It's year 2, right? So
2.
It's not like they're super far along. What I would like to see them do, and maybe if we're both calling fiction here, this might be a way to drum up organically spacing. Or no, it should stay here. I don't know why they're playing Jabari at center less this year in the non-Şengün minutes. I understand you have Adams and Landale for some, like if you view him as someone who needs to play, but like, and I know Jabari hasn't had the best year, but in theory, that's a way to kind of open up the floor even more to where, okay, maybe we're not going to make a ton of threes still, but will the floor be more open? Defenses are going to guard Jabari differently than they guard a Steven Adams or Jock Landale. So that's something that's puzzled me because I think that their offense has room to be better. So it's all right. You're not playing Jabari at the 5 a ton, and you're not playing Reed Shepherd a ton at all. What are you viewing this season as then? Just like we're going to destroy you defensively by fire. And it's look, there's even, I would argue, look at Tari Eason. That dude can take more threes. Like there is room for him to take more threes in his game. He's shooting pretty well on them this season. I think he's like 38% or whatever. So that's why I'm going fiction here. I don't trust their offense, which is a very weird thing to say about a team that has Alperen Şengün on it.
Yeah. I mean, I think you mentioned Jabari Smith. Like I had him as an X factor coming into the year because it was, to me, it was fairly foreseeable that like this team is going to need one, you're going to need more than 99 possessions with him as center, which is all they've had so far, just because you can get some different looks when Şengün's off the floor, space it, whatever. But two, like there just aren't, you just needed him to be the like premium spacing threat at a big forward or center spot that he looked like he was going to become. And he's making a quarter of his threes this year. It's 25%. Yeah. So like, I do think, I mean, I picked him as an X factor, like for this reason. If he shoots it really well and just is making a big offensive impact, I wonder what that does to our concerns about the team's offense as a whole, because that would be such a vital dimension that I think, frankly, like Houston, I know I did, thought was going to be there. I just assumed the trajectory would continue upward with him. And it's a dozen games into the year. So like he could have a hot week and we're right back to like, okay, this guy is super important offensively and he's been great.
I'm sorry to interrupt, Grant, but would you like to take this next factor fiction?
Tari Eason, Dan, is already more important to the Rockets' future and less likely to be traded than Jabari Smith Jr. Man, we're catching Tari Eason at a good time and Jabari Smith at a bad time for this conversation.
Well, I think Rockets fans, I'm not to their credit, like they need credit. Like they were having this discussion for a while. We had someone on our Discord point that out saying they thought Jabari was, and I thought that was wild just because of what Jabari did this preseason, what Jabari did last year. And then Tari always seems like he's kind of dealing with a health problem. Mm-hmm. And I was thinking of what they need offensively. And it's just Tari, not that he's redundant, but they just have an embarrassment of defensive riches on this team. But man.
so Eason, let's talk through it. Eason is, and like this was foreseeable if he could stay healthy, which he has for to a greater extent than last year, obviously, one of the most disruptive defensive players in the league, like just period. Just super high energy. I mean, he what was it against Golden State? He just won them a third quarter. Like just the Warriors almost blew a 30-point lead and lost that game because he just kept getting steals and layups. Like that's just what he can do. I still think the potential Smith has, and maybe I'm overrating it, to be a really good offensive stretch piece that I still think can develop into someone that's going to get a lot of his own shots and just has like this offensive ceiling. Now, maybe I'm just wrong about that. And if that's the case, then this is probably fact. I still default to like the super high energy defensive, I don't know, semi-positionless forward is awesome. Helps every team. But like the potential, what Smith could be, I think is just rarer and maybe more valuable, like as like a top end piece. And if Smith can't get there and I'm just wrong that he can get close to that, then this is fact. I'm not sure I'm ready to like render judgment on that yet.
So you're saying fiction?
I think it's fiction. And maybe I'm just wrong.
We finally disagree. I think it's fact. Okay. And it has less to do with how I feel about Jabari moving forward and more okay, you've invested in Alperen Şengün, you've invested in Amen Thompson, and look, it's worked defensively with those two. The offense does not look great when both of those guys are on the floor. They have their moments, but the Rockets are shooting like 25% on three with those two on the court, not making enough of them. And their offense, by the way, when you add Jabari into the fold with those two, only 120 possessions, but it's in the 0th percentile. And so you're starting to run into a math game of those are three guys, all of whom are extremely talented, two of whom I would say like can arguably hit threes. Defenses don't care. None of those are guys that defenses are going to care about. And Tari Eason might be viewed in the same vein, but he's going to take more threes and like he's going to hit a higher percentage of them as well. And so I think you factor that in to where you've already invested in Alperen Şengün moving forward, and you have this very specific talent type in Amen Thompson. The path to Jabari Smith Jr. being more valuable would be, well, we think that he's our backup center, which the Rockets don't necessarily seem like they view him as that primarily. Or two, he's just hitting so much of his threes that he's more of a valuable floor spacer than some of these other guys. Look, they could decide that both Fred VanVleet and Dylan Brooks are the ones to go and we're going to pay everybody. They're not going to actually do that, though. Like you and I have been doing this a long time. That's not how this is going to work out. They're going to end up choosing between guys. I think it's been boiled down to a Tari or Jabari thing. Maybe it doesn't end up. Maybe Jalen Green gets traded over the offseason and the complexion of their future changes. But I think as of right now, for what they need, and then based off what we've now seen them do, and I would say just based off how they've used Jabari, I think this is a fact.
Man, I hope
New Orleans calls them too, if that's what you were going to say.
I can't quit Jabari's potential, but
that's not quitting Jabari's potential, by the way.
Well, yeah, I mean, I guess like to use the word I used incorrectly for another Rockets player, I would just hope that Smith proves undeniable as an offensive player at some point. And just like, if that Eason has outshot and outscored him this year, and for damn sure has been a bigger defensive difference maker. So like, there's no case at the moment that Smith has been better than Eason. The shooting is just so tantalizing and the offensive potential is there. I don't know, bro. Is it your sense that Rockets fans are just lower on Smith's offensive upside than I continue to be?
I have no comment on Rockets fans at the moment.
Got it.
But no, I just think like any fan base, you go through the motions where the sentiment on Jabari last year felt like it was super high and impressive.
But it's so fickle, you know. That's why they started this with it's the right time to talk about this for Eason because he's been so good.
It's fickle also because though, like part of why, not that this wouldn't be a decision, but would we view it through a different lens where because this isn't happening yet, Grant, and he's not like forget about whether he's starting or not, but like the minutes per game that Amen Thompson is playing, and he has started one game this season, they're not so high. Like he's had a few 30+ performances, but you're eventually going to want Amen Thompson to just be a 30-minute per game player. And I'm assuming an every night starter at some point. Now, who makes more sense for this roster moving forward? I think you could argue, well, Eason is going to be the cleaner offensive fit right now. But also if you need to continue to, or start bringing someone off the bench, like Eason isn't someone who technically needs to start, whereas with Jabari, are you going to then bring him off the bench? I guess in theory you could, but that's not something that they've explored yet. And so I'm also wondering if that contributes to this at all.
Yeah, it could definitely be a factor.
I'm glad we disagreed finally. Our next one, which is mine, Grant, the Dallas Mavericks are going to be fine. Fact or fiction?
I gotta go fact. I mean, like, it's just imagine where we are if Luka had a good game against Utah, which except for the last moments where he forgot about John Collins being on the basketball court and let him dunk to win the game. Not great. He hasn't shot it all. He hasn't shot it well all year. He's got a groin issue he's fighting through, like that kind of stuff. Dallas is 5-7 as we record this. They're in the top 10 on offense and defense, and almost nothing's gone right. So like, I guess you could be concerned. You know, Klay Thompson has kind of continued looking like a diminished version of himself year over year.
But he's been exactly, I would say, like what you thought you were going to get. Like, what else were they expecting?
I kind of assumed teams thought they were going to get a better player than he was for Golden State last year. And he's been roughly the same or a little bit worse. But good point. PJ Washington hasn't played a bunch. They just don't win when he's not in the lineup. I'm just trying to like poke holes, but ultimately it's just, you have Luka, you have Kyrie, you have a bunch of size on the wing and forward spots. You got two bigs you can trust. Like what's our issue here? It's just their point differential is that of a team that should have like almost 3 more wins than they do, and the offense and defense are both top. Like I can't. It's way too early. Now, if we go another month and they're under 500, we can talk.
Yeah.
But I'm just not. I can't get there.
I can't get there. Mavs fans seem concerned after the Jazz loss, and I saw a few of them go in on that. And by the way, but hell yeah, like that's like I want to see you going on this team for the effort level on defense. But look at some of the stuff that has been beyond their control. Like Luka dealing with the injury, always bleeding, apparently, and just like his efficiency everywhere away from the basket has fallen off a cliff. That's not going to stand. We've even seen this happen before, maybe not to this degree, where he kind of starts slow, then he's just amazing. Kyrie Irving's been fantastic before he missed that Utah Jazz game. You already mentioned it. PJ Washington missed time. The fact that they're in top 10 in defense, he's missed time. Derek Lively II has missed time. Daniel Gafford looks worse this year to me defensively. By the way, you also have PJ Washington and Najee Marshall are shooting like 0% on wide open threes, basically. Luka, again, his 3-point percentage will tick up. Some of the things, can you have questions about their overall bench rotation? I think Klay's been better for the Mavs than Golden State in the sense like he's not, I don't want to use the word hijack, but like there's not an existential crisis going on with
that.
Him
is a fair word, by the way. Like he's not like relentlessly shot hunting quite the same.
Yeah, degree. So it's just it feels like it's more within the flow of things, and there's going to be, I think, the inherent. He's older. What happens defensively, and then just those shots he takes, like you're just going to be subject to more wild swings in my book. You said it. What has gone right? And I would say Kyrie, and that's about it for them. The other thing that I would, now, if you're interested in the concerns, the 2 things I would point out, do I think Luka's going to shoot better in the clutch? Absolutely. But like at some point, I know clutch it could be a lot of randomized stuff, but 1 and 6 in crunch time to start the season, not great, Bob. And then the actual bigger concern for me, and we've seen this kind of reverse, maybe by force over the past 2 games. There's no reason that Spencer Dinwiddie should be ahead of Quentin Grimes in the rotation. I know he got the start against Utah, I believe, but like, what is Jason Kidd's complaining about his bench? And like, I don't think Quentin Grimes has been terrible this year. So it feels like there's some low hanging fruit for the Mavs to still kind of clean up. If you were going to isolate though, for me, a concern and say like, this is something we like really need to worry about. Do they have like enough, like they might need another offensive creator where is it Dinwiddie? Is it going to be Jaden Hardy? Probably not. Dante Exum's injured this year. Probably wouldn't have been him anyway. And if Luka's going to continue to be up and down or injured, and I'm talking about, that's not Klay Thompson's role. I know some Mavs fans thought it might be. Like, no, like, please stop. It's definitely not PJ Washington's role. He's got kind of the nifty floater sometimes, but they might need, and I guess the concern would be, do they need like a higher end, like 3rd offensive weapon than we would have expected coming into this season? I would call that fiction as well. But it's like when we were thinking in terms of, I'm just trying to like think of a cheap example. Like, well, Peyton Pritchard would be good for this team, but now it's become, no, they need like an Aaron Wiggins type player. Then we need to have a different discussion.
So does everybody. Everybody needs an Aaron Wiggins. I would flag though. I don't know what to make of this, but Jason Kidd had some recent comments, and it seemed like they may have been in context of like, it was difficult for Klay to make the Golden State return. And he was just talking about like, our guys are players too. There's off the court things going on. They're mentally fatigued. It seemed to be referencing something more than just how difficult it was for Klay to make the return to Chase Center last week. I just wonder what that is. Maybe there's a vibe issue here. Maybe there's some off court, difficulties some of these guys are going through. It was a weird allusion by him to something I hadn't really heard about before. Maybe Dallas fans have a better sense of what any of that is, but like, I don't know if you're trying to concern troll, I guess like maybe that's something, but this is fact. I think they're going to be fine. Next
one up, the Minnesota Timberwolves, Mr. Hughes.
Minnesota Timberwolves are also going to be fine, Dan.
So I don't know if you had to pick which team you're more concerned about. That might be interesting. I think they're going to be fine as well. The turnovers are definitely an issue. They're an abomination. I think that it would also help if Mike Conley was shooting better on a nightly basis. He's had a couple better games of late. But the fact that you have that in conjunction with, okay, the spacing's already, it's not weirder, but like Anthony Edwards is taking a ton of threes and making them because he has to. Like this is, I would argue it's a good evolution, but it's also a necessary one based on the makeup of their roster. Jaden McDaniels, we know he can shoot better from 3, but he's not going to take any more of them. So there's been just some oddity and awkwardness on the offensive end. Dante DiVincenzo still really hasn't gone on an extended run. But that's why I name all those things the turnovers, even the transition defense they've talked about a lot. Because after they're committing a turnover, they're getting slammed by opposed. That tends to happen, but they've been worse than the league average in that as well. I just think they have the personnel in-house to fix most of this. Now, if you think that Conley has just dropped off and this is okay, he's 37 and he's getting older, and then you really just, okay, that's bad because our connective tissue on the offensive end, yeah, Julius Randle can do some playmaking. Even Dante DiVincenzo, we know what Ant can do. But like, no, like the theory of having Mike Conley is he's super important. We know Rob Dillingham isn't ready. Maybe that would be okay, it's time to be concerned. But I need to give this team more time because even with defensively, I think they have the personnel to fix it. And maybe it gets to the discussion needs to be, is it time to change up some of the lineups and the rotations? Where does Dante DiVincenzo need to get nods over Mike Conley or even over Julius Randle at points? But again, that's still tinkering in-house.
Yeah, I lean that way too. I will say, like, so they're 6-6, and obviously that's just not what the results were expected to be. I thought it was really interesting that John Krasinski for The Athletic wrote the other day, and this was after the first loss to the Blazers, not the second one in a back-to-back set. Really was calling out like just how the Wolves aren't playing with the same fight and fire and like prove it mentality that they had a year ago. And like my antenna always goes up with stuff like that because whenever coaches talk about like, oh, we're not fighting hard enough, it's always like, this is bullshit. Like there's always something tactical you should be talking about or tweaking a lineup or whatever. Like this whole, like, they're not trying hard enough always just falls so flat to me. You know, it's like the type of thing coaches say when they're actually out of ideas a lot of the time. Not putting that on Krasinski. Like I think like nobody's more tapped into like what the whole Wolves experience is. I do believe, and I think you've seen it, there's not the same edge, to use like another kind of, you know, whatever, like, what does that term even mean? But like,
do they want it as much, Grant?
Do they want, that's what it is. We just don't want it. We're not out there compete. Like, okay, we're all professionals. I do think like you can just flip it and say like, we're not getting back on live rebounds. Teams are getting too many easy transition looks in situations where it's just like, if you're just disciplined, get back. Like then the turnover stuff, there's all these, you know, actually more helpful areas you could point to that they should get better at. And I do just chalk a lot of that up to, you made a massive trade that changed the makeup of your team, like at the 11th hour. And we don't know where everybody wants to be. Like, and the guys that you got, like Randall falls asleep on defense or just stands still all the time. That's somewhat expected, but he's also delivering a lot of what you wanted on offense. Dante DiVincenzo has not been the 3-point shooter more shots. Like they'll make shots. So I understand the concern, but this is also fact. I just think like you said it right. Like they're just in-house solutions to all this stuff, and I think it would be, in some ways it might have been a bigger surprise if they just hit the ground running and were like 11-1 or whatever because of the changes that they made. I one thing that is an issue. The rim protection, now their overall like rim attempt frequency and accuracy allowed are not critical or not critically terrible, but like with Naz Reid and Julius Randle as your backup, like bigs, they're allowing over 60% shooting by opponents at the rim. Like it's, you know, even Rudy Gobert's at 55%. I think certainly Gobert's numbers probably coming down, but those two guys, that's an issue that, you know, you'd love to have more defensive integrity, especially from a team that ran away with the lead in defensive efficiency last year. I'm not going to worry.
Leonard Miller time.
It's Leonard Miller, Josh Minot, get him out there.
Yeah, I'm not worried either. So I'm going to call this a fact as well. It is to see the Knicks and them make such seismic trades, and then neither one of them is off to. You could say, yeah, it was always going to take time, but I would say neither one of them are off to encouraging starts.
Sure, yeah, that's
who are you more confident in? I'm more confident in the Wolves at this point. I'm not going.
Oh, really? I'm more confident in Dallas.
I meant the Knicks or the Wolves.
Oh, interesting. Probably the Wolves, actually, because where do the Knicks turn? They just don't have other guys to play. Like it's just, this is the team.
They allegedly will at some point, but we'll have to wait and see. I think I would agree with you. I'm probably more concerned about the Wolves relative to Dallas, though. But the concern level for both, again, come talk to me in a couple weeks. But right now, it's incredibly low for both teams. Next up, this one's mine. Oh, the Los Angeles Clippers are a threat in the West. Fact or fiction?
I mean, a threat. So I just want to.
I'll define it.
Yeah,
they are hovering around 500. Their defense is, this would be the appropriate word. Their defense is hellfire, and they don't have Kawhi Leonard, who we assume will play at some point this season. If he does, the offense gets a lot more intriguing because, Norman Powell is now your third option instead of your second. Things get easier on James Harden, who has not played when you look at his efficiency up to snuff. And so you kind of look at this team. We thought they were going to be an abomination. Just collectively, we thought they were going to be so bad. We said the defense would be good. It's been great. And we just thought they were going to suck. They have not sucked. And so I'm wondering here, the factor fiction would be, unless you think Kawhi's not going to play or that he's never really going to be available or that they wouldn't be willing to make a trade, like, could they just be a playoff team, like a top 6 team that were party crashed the top 8 to where they're one of the better play-in teams because the offense is at least positioned to get better. And when you view it through the lens of, well, they could still make a trade, or 2, Kawhi Leonard might just come back and, you have one of the, 10 to 15 most valuable players in basketball for however long he's available.
I think because they're still like, I know the record is way better than we thought it would be, but and Powell has done much more than we thought he would. And even Ivica Zubac has just been better. I think like their profile of, man, this offense is rough and Kawhi is hurt and the defense is good, like matches up closely enough to what we kind of expected prior to the season that I'm not really ready to adjust what I thought they would be overall. Which is to say, like, I think I'm leaning fiction just because if the way this sustains or gets better as Kawhi Leonard is consistently healthy, I'm not ready to view that as like a likelihood. And I think Harden, like, this team turns it over a shit ton. Harden is back at around 30% usage, which he hasn't really touched since his Houston days. And I'm just not comfortable with that. And his efficiency is not very good, which is what we would have expected. I think the offense is pretty flimsy, and Leonard coming back can help that when he's in the lineup, probably, assuming he gets like ramped up and then is able to stay out there consistently to catch a rhythm. I don't know how likely that is. So I think the offense is going to just be a problem. And then, we've praised Norm Powell plenty, but I don't think he's going to continue to be this good. So defensively, I buy it. Offensively, I sell it. And I think it's just, this is still close enough to what we thought, to me, to where, and I didn't think the Clippers were a threat in the West, and I'm not going to flip on that yet.
So I'm going to go fact in the sense of, I view them as more of a threat than the Rockets in the, like,
wow. Okay.
Because we don't think the Rockets are going to make the move. And where is the offense then getting better all of a sudden?
Our guy, my guy, Jabari Smith Jr. makes more than 25% of his threes.
And guess what? He was better last year and their offense still wasn't that great.
Yeah.
So it's just like with the Clippers, I look at it as, okay, so you're going to take, like, look at your core lineup. Kawhi Leonard comes back for any stretch of time. And just the fact that potential addition is open and we don't think that's going to happen with the Rockets. Kawhi Leonard's going to come back and now you're playing him, instead of, I'm assuming Powell will still start when he comes back. So I guess Chris Dunn. Or do you take out Derek Jones in that scenario? Or would Norm Powell come off the bench? Regardless, it's just you insert Kawhi Leonard into any of their base lineups. Like, holy shit. Like, that fixes the offense. Like, it makes life easier on James Harden. Will make it easier on Norm Powell. It'll make it easier even if Norm Powell's the one that's not on the floor, because Kawhi is someone who's going to generate his shots in a different way and more of his own shots than a Norm Powell might. So I'm going to say, do I think that they're going to finish in the top 6? I would call that fiction. But if you're asking me, do I think that they could be a top, like, are they more likely to be a threat in the West than, like, let's go through the list of teams. And if we're going to use the Rockets, the baseline, I will take them over the Rockets right now.
I can see the upside, and it's just Leonard. And for that reason, I'm out. Like, I can't trust that Leonard is going to come back and be impactful. Like, if it happens, I'll be ecstatic, because great. We want the best players to play and be healthy on a personal standpoint. Like, really hope that this is something he could get through and whatever. I just don't, I'm going to need to see it for a long time, for a long chunk of the season before I get on board.
What do we have next, Mr. Grant Hughes?
Dan, multiple teams will trade first-round picks in 2029 or later. Fact or fiction?
So let's go through the candidates really quickly. I would say the Lakers and the Suns, because those are the two teams that are pictured here or there. The Bucks have a 2031 pick that they could trade. Who else would be a team that you could see trade?
The Nuggets have one in the 30s?
They could trade their 2031 first-round pick, so they would be They would be in there. And there are obviously other teams that could trade it, but I'm looking at the candidates that might be good enough to consider it.
Yeah.
Minnesota can't.
Golden State, right? They
could trade.
a share.
I thought about like they clearly haven't punted on 2030 because it's top 20 protected. But if you dangled like, well, we'll give you the bottom 10 protected first rounder in 2030. So yeah, Golden State in theory, maybe a team that would look at that. The Clippers, that would be like, I proposed. And by the way, Bulls fans were mad about this. I'm not saying that this, but like if you could get the Clippers pick in 2030 along with Terrence Mann, you at least think about trading Kobe White, right?
Yeah, I mean, for the reasons we've talked about, of like it's hard, they can't extend him.
I think that would be my criticism of fan bases when they look at trades. Is I'm not expecting. I don't want people to necessarily care about the finances of it all and when the trades could be completed, but you need to understand the value of a distant first round pick. That'd be my one quibble. But so what was that? 5 or half a dozen teams?
Yeah. Who's most likely to? Who's because we're trying to get to multiple.
Honestly, I've already penciled in that 2031 first rounder to someone else. It feels like Phoenix is going to be the team to do it.
Well, the
Sixers. But they have the Clippers 28 pick. Are they going to go any further out than that? But they would probably be a candidate too, right?
Yeah, I think. Well, sure. Daryl Morey's involved, and then Phoenix, like literally everything Phoenix has done to this point suggests the second a pick is available to trade, they'll trade it for short-term gain. Yeah, I think I go fact here because we only need 2 for this to be a fact, and you've just listed 2 very likely candidates, and you just need, Phoenix feels like such a given, and then you just need one more.
I'm gonna go fiction because I really am only confident because the Bucks are sad. And so they're really
going to do it. They're going to they're a given, I think. Phoenix
for what then?
Because I don't know.
Their salary matching sucks because you can trade it attached to Chris Middleton, but what is that? Like, what is the trade there? So then are you attaching your 2031 first to Bobby Portis? And then who's a player good enough in that like $12 million range that's going to fit it? And the fact that they're probably thinking about life after Giannis because of all the speculation, I feel like makes it less likely they move it. The Lakers seem like they're trying to rebuild for something like around LeBron. And I don't know what they're doing. So I just don't trust them to part with, and they could trade. They have their 29 and 2031 pick to trade. It's like they could trade 2 of them. So that in theory should make them more likely. Don't trust or expect them to do it. Philly is like kind of weird because they have other assets to move. So I'd almost vote against it. I think the Suns are the only team, and the Clippers are they good enough? They already kind of came into this season where it felt like they were going to treat it as a figure it out season. Like, where is this headed? So why would you give up a 2030 first round pick? So I'm going to say, I mean, maybe we should just throw an OKC in there because they probably have a trillion of them. Like, but right. I'm going to say fiction. I think one team will do it, but to get to 2 is a lot.
Okay. Well, that's good. We have another disagreement. I'm going fact.
Oh man. This is sad. Grant, at least one playoff team in the East will have a losing record, fact or fiction? Or would you like me to go through the BPI projections on what the East playoff is going to look like?
Well, let's first settle on what playoffs mean. So we'll just say post play-in of the top 8 teams that actually compete in the playoffs, we're saying 1 or more will have a losing record. And then go ahead with the BPI.
So I would say based off BPI that we should probably add some more teams into that because BPI has the ESPN NBA Basketball Power Index projections. They have the 6th seed, which would be the Knicks, winning 39 games. So that would mean that 3 teams, 6, 7, 8, end up being under 500 in the East and making the playoffs.
The Knicks are not finishing under 500. Like that's...
Well, hold on. I would agree, but I'm not going to rule it out.
No, I'm not. A meteor can hit the earth tomorrow.
Wins and losses. Honestly, what have you seen from them that makes you think that?
I don't know. I just like their top guys. This is an easy fact for me. The East, because you have the usual suspects, and then you have the Phillies and Milwaukee's that are just fighting uphill the rest of the way. So you got to give the stat of the 15 teams.
Yeah, so 15 teams right now have a positive point differential per 100 possessions outside of garbage time per cleaning the glass. I can't ask you how many of them come from the West because you know the answer. 11 come from the Western Conference. That is bonkers. By the way, you know what it's the Magic are projected per BPI to finish third. And we don't even know when Powell Banchero is going to come back. They fattened up their schedule. Like, I think they won 4 straight against really shitty teams. But like, what is happening? There are injuries in Milwaukee and Philly, but the Knicks are worse than expected. Miami, I guess, is about where we would expect it, but they seem sadder somehow. Like, their record is maybe where you expect to be. The Bulls and Nets are winning entirely too many basketball games at the moment.
Let's look at it this way. Who in the East are you like, would you bet anything on finishing with a winning record? Definitely Boston, definitely Cleveland. And then we're already in the Orlando, New York, Indy, Philly, Milwaukee area. Like, I think it's 2. I mean, obviously somebody else is going to finish with a winning record, like several somebodies, but like other than Boston and Cleveland, we got questions about every single other team. Maybe Orlando is the safest, but like their best player's hurt right now with a major injury.
Yeah, but you know what? Like, scrappy defense will like get you through like sort of the Clippers model, but you play in a shittier conference. It probably works out quite well for you.
Yeah.
So I think the answer is, even if you want to nominate another team, the answer is 3 that you could guarantee are going to finish above 500.
But you can't name the third team, right? Like, you're just
right. But I would ask though, do you think? And if I had to guess, it'd be Philly more so than Milwaukee. But because of how weak the East is, we could talk about, well, some of these guys aren't going to play every game. How much ground are they ceding? But the Sixers, as we record this, they're 3 losses out of third place. So it's like, if you just is there just a chance that because the East is so, what is the word? But because the East is the East, that they didn't, like, they're not going to lose too much time. They're going to run off this stretch, and then they just look dominant because the field below them is not great.
Yeah. I mean, like, the BPI projection is like really jarring to me, because you do just like, the wins are there. It's not like, it is an unbalanced schedule. You're not playing, equal numbers of games against the West or whatever. So like, you might have, I don't know, Charlotte might go 42-40 or something crazy like that, or like Atlanta or whatever. But just as it stands now, I don't feel confident in any teams other than Boston and Cleveland, like definitely finishing with winning. This is one of the easiest facts that we've had so far.
We weren't aggressive. This was mine. We weren't, or did we collectively come up with this one? We weren't aggressive enough. So I'm going to change it. I'm not going to actually change it, but okay, this is a fact. If I say 2 of the top 8 teams in the East are going to have a below 500 record post play, or it doesn't even matter. Like, because if it's post playing, like, that just means, I guess if 2 of the East playoff teams, we're talking first round of the playoffs, are going to have a below 500 record. Fact or fiction?
I'm going to stick fact. I feel good about it.
No way though. Is there? Oh God. I'm going to say fiction, because I don't want that to happen, because then it's, well, I guess it matters more that, all right, the Cavs and Boston exist, so you could trust them coming out of the East and giving the West a run for their money in the finals. But if we only have 2 teams that are legitimate title contenders in the Eastern Conference, that kind of sucks.
Well, and then isn't it I mean, you have to think of it from the other side too. Like, if Boston and Cleveland are like no notes teams in the East, what if they both win like 66 games? Like, that's where all the wins go. They just sop up all these extra wins, and there aren't any left. Like, and like right now, I mean, we should have, I just thought of it, so we didn't prep it, but like, when's the last time we had 2 teams in the same conference? Is it like the Houston Golden State year? Or not even.
They didn't win 60. Yeah.
Yeah. The 60 plus wins teams, that cannot happen often, but I mean, as we're looking at it now,
and by the way, this is even a little bit crazier. So when you're looking at just the point per game differential, there are 12 teams in the West that have a positive point differential. So just total points there, which net rating is more accurate, but like 12 and 15.
Yeah, and so you've got four of 15 in the East. That's look, the Knicks are plus 3.6, not net, but just total, average points per game. They're going to be, you know what? The Knicks are going to
look. The Knicks will be above 500. I don't know if they're going to be a title contender though. Maybe that'd be a different discussion. We're going to have to buy or sell like title contender status. But do you have anything else on this, or would you like to take us out of here?
I mean, this is a great one to end on because it's kind of
let us know in the comments. I want to know in the comments, our Discord, go join that. Links in the podcast YouTube description. How many of the top 8 teams, when all is said and done, playing and everything in the Eastern Conference, will be below 500? And we're saying Grant is saying, are you saying more than 2? I'm going to
You
say
said
1.
no. You said 2, so I'm sticking with 2. I don't want to stretch it too far. BPI thinks 3, but I'm going to stay 2.
I'm going to say 1, and BPI thinks 3. What do you think?
That was fun. Thanks, Dan. Thanks, everybody, for watching, for listening. As usual, remember, please rate, review, subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Check us out on YouTube, which if you're watching, thank you. You're doing that already. But if you're here, please subscribe. Leave us some comments.
And we're getting downvoted again. And I will put in, here's a peek behind the curtain. I didn't even tell you this, Grant. Someone wrote a review complaining we have too many ads. And the ad model changed for the system that we used, where the recommended ads went up. Now, I'll call bullshit on them saying they pop up at random times because I timestamped the shit out of this. And so if something happens after that, if the ads are somehow screwing it up and bumping it, that's beyond my control. I'm a little bit annoyed because they said in the comment we're the best podcast and the ads ruined it. So you didn't write a review when we were the best podcast. Something pops up when you didn't like it. Thank you for listening. We're actually going to put in less ads, but that means that Grant and I have to manually fix that. And now we're going to be taking a pay cut. But I want the user experience. Some people have said it to me on the side. So I do listen to the comments, but if you're not regularly like interacting with us, look inward and say, why do I have to give this podcast that I think is great a 1-star review when I know they put a lot of work in? Because I don't like the ad model that we also know in this day and age, they don't have direct control over it. So that pretty annoyed me given how invested we are in this. But again, I'm taking feedback into account. Other people have said something. It was a change that I tried to at least space them out the best I could. But Grant and I didn't even tell Grant this. Grant, you're taking a pay cut. So,
well, I didn't agree to that at all. Also, by the way, most phones, assuming you're listening to this, have a little 30-second skip button. Just touch it.
So thank you for downvoting us and ruining that. So everybody get in there, upvote us on Apple.
Yeah.
That was my long spiel. I will say, I do think the numbers are egregious. So I was planning on cutting them down in the new year anyway, but I'm going to cut them down now. I just wanted to talk to you about it first, but I figured, why not let the listeners, why not let you find out when the listeners found out? So now they'll pop up they were making them like every 6 minutes, Grant, and I cut them down to like every 9. They're going to go back to being every 15 to 20. If that's too much for you, go away. Like, I don't know what else to tell you.
I think the takeaway here is let's get in there and get some more upvotes. We gotta offset some of this. What else? Join our Discord. Maybe that'd be another place to comment, or we can have a good discussion about like who in the East we think is going to finish above 500 for sure. I think that's going to cover it. Tell your friends, tell your enemies. If you see him, shout out Frank Ntilikina and apologize to Jared Allen.